Special Agent Charles Thompson received the encrypted message at 6:47 a.m. on October 14, 2019, while finishing his morning coffee in his Denver apartment. After 18 years with the FBI, he'd learned to recognize the weight behind certain communications. This one carried coordinates for something called Administrative Processing Center Delta 7, a designation that meant nothing to him, which in itself was significant. At 44, Thompson had built his career on understanding the Bureau's intricate network of facilities and operations. Thompson had earned his position the hard way, starting as a young field agent in Chicago's violent crime unit and grinding through cases for nearly 2 decades. His 47 closed investigations and spotless record had earned him the kind of trust that came with assignments like this one. But it also meant walking into situations where failure could end careers, including his own. The message's classification level and direct routing from headquarters told him this wasn't routine business. The drive to Blackwater took him through Colorado terrain that became increasingly isolated with each mile. What started as suburban Denver morphed into rural farmland, then empty grassland, broken only by oil derricks and abandoned homesteads. No highway signs marked the turnoff, just a small metal placard reading U.S. government property, authorized personnel only, beside an unmarked dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. Thompson's credentials were verified 3 times before he reached the main gate. First by an automated license plate scanner, then through radio challenge requiring daily authentication codes, and finally through biometric verification against federal databases. The guards weren't typical federal security. They were contracted specialists with military backgrounds, chosen for their ability to maintain security while remaining invisible to outside observation. The facility itself defied easy description. Low concrete buildings arranged in defensive patterns, surrounded by dual layers of razor wire and monitored by cameras mounted on 30-foot poles. What struck Thompson immediately was the absolute silence. No highway noise, no aircraft overhead, no sounds of civilization. Blackwater existed in a carefully maintained bubble of isolation, positioned beyond the range of most commercial satellite systems. Agent Thompson, Director Kenneth Miller is waiting for you in Conference Room C, said the senior guard, a man in his late 50s with the controlled alertness that came from years of high-stakes security work. You'll need to surrender all electronic devices except your Bureau-issued equipment. Miller was the kind of FBI administrator Thompson respected, a career professional who'd earned his position through competence rather than politics. At 58, Miller had overseen witness protection operations across the western United States for over a decade. In a bureau increasingly concerned with public relations and congressional oversight, Miller was old school. Results mattered more than appearances, and protecting witnesses came before bureaucratic convenience. The conference room was windowless, with acoustic dampening that suggested conversations here were meant to remain absolutely confidential. Multiple computer terminals connected to classified databases lined one wall, while secure communication equipment provided encrypted links to FBI headquarters and international law enforcement agencies. Agent Thompson, thank you for coming on short notice, Miller began, sliding a manila folder across the table. Its classification markings indicated information among the most sensitive handled by the federal government. We have a situation requiring immediate attention and the highest level of investigative expertise. 3 days ago, we lost contact with one of our most valuable witnesses. Thompson opened the folder to find a photograph of a man in his early 40s with thinning dark hair and nervous eyes. The name below read Michael Vincent Castellano, followed by classification markings indicating his testimony had been crucial to multiple federal prosecutions involving organized crime and political corruption. Castellano had been the Torino family's accountant, the man who knew where every dollar came from and where it went. His testimony hadn't just convicted Anthony Torino and 17 associates. It had exposed a corruption network reaching into the Port Authority, the State Transportation Department, and allegedly into federal law enforcement itself. The Organized Crime Task Force called it the most significant breakthrough against institutional corruption in 20 years. Castellano was scheduled for his weekly psychological evaluation, Monday morning at 0800 hours, Miller explained, consulting detailed logs. He never showed up. Security officer Frank Johnson found his room empty 30 minutes later. No signs of struggle, no indication of forced entry. His personal belongings were undisturbed, including the emergency communication device we provide all high-risk witnesses. The implications made Thompson's stomach tighten. If the electronic security systems were functioning properly, then someone with authorized access had facilitated Castellano's disappearance. That meant the breach came from within Blackwater itself, from someone trusted with protecting the most valuable witnesses in federal custody. Agent Thompson, there are only 14 people with authorized access to Witness Housing Unit 3, where Castellano was staying, Miller continued. Each access is logged electronically by 2 independent systems. According to our records, no one entered or left that unit between Sunday night and Tuesday morning. Thompson understood he was potentially dealing with individuals who'd undergone extensive training in deception and could present convincing false personas while conducting hostile operations against federal law enforcement. The facility protected witnesses whose testimonies could bring down entire criminal empires. Insiders who'd betrayed organizations worth billions, whose knowledge could topple governments and expose corruption reaching into Congress and corporate boardrooms. Security Chief Walter Brown was a former FBI technical specialist whose expertise in surveillance technology and counterintelligence had made him one of the most trusted security professionals in the federal system. His office contained computer terminals connected to classified databases and monitoring systems providing real-time surveillance of every aspect of facility operations. The security office represented the nerve center of sophisticated surveillance and protection systems. Dozens of high-definition monitors displayed feeds from cameras throughout the facility, each equipped with infrared capability and facial recognition software. The system recorded continuously, maintaining digital archives stretching back 7 years on secure servers with multiple backup systems. Brown pulled up electronic access logs for Witness Housing Unit 3, displaying detailed records documenting every authorized entry to secure areas housing high-value witnesses. The logs showed routine patterns that had remained consistent for months. Daily entries by background-checked cleaning staff, weekly medical visits, and regular security checks following predetermined schedules. Everything appeared normal until Thompson noticed an anomaly that triggered his investigative instincts. Among the routine access records was an entry from Sunday night at 11:47 p.m. that differed significantly from normal patterns. Chief Brown, can you explain this entry? Thompson pointed to the anomalous log. It shows Unit 3 being accessed, but there's no identification code. How is that possible? Brown's face darkened as he examined the entry, pulling up additional screens, cross-referencing it with biometric scanner records and backup security systems. His expression grew increasingly concerned as he analyzed the data. That shouldn't be possible, Brown said, his voice carrying professional alarm. Every access card has a unique identifier that must be verified before doors unlock. The system includes multiple redundancy checks specifically to prevent unauthorized access. Brown ran diagnostic programs and discovered something more troubling. The same type of anomalous entry appeared 17 times over 6 months, always during late night or early morning hours when staffing was reduced, always without proper identification codes, always lasting 30 to 60 minutes. Someone has been conducting systematic unauthorized access to witness housing units, Brown concluded, the implications clear. Agent Thomas Wilson, serving as Thompson's partner during the investigation, leaned over to examine the data. Wilson was younger, perhaps 35, with analytical skills that had helped him rise quickly through bureau ranks. He'd been at Blackwater for 2 years as the facility's liaison with Witness Protection Headquarters in Washington. Is it possible someone with administrative privileges has been modifying these logs? Wilson asked. Theoretically, yes, Brown admitted. Someone with Level 5 security clearance could potentially modify access logs, but that would require intimate knowledge of our protocols and sophisticated understanding of our surveillance equipment. Thompson felt a chill. Level 5 clearance was restricted to 5 senior staff members: Director Miller, Chief Brown, Dr. Patricia Hawkins, facility psychologist, and 2 other administrators. All had undergone extensive background investigations and psychological evaluations. I need to see all security camera footage for the past week, Thompson said. Start with corridors leading to Unit 3, then expand to cover the entire facility. For 4 hours, Thompson and Wilson methodically reviewed security footage, examining video from cameras throughout the facility. The cameras showed usual facility patterns: staff making rounds, witnesses moving between common areas under escort, maintenance workers performing supervised tasks. At 11:47 p.m. Sunday night, something unusual appeared on cameras covering the corridor to Unit 3. A figure in dark clothing moved with deliberate purpose, but their face was obscured by calculated camera avoidance. The person moved with intimate knowledge of camera positions, staying close to walls where facial recognition software couldn't identify them. Whoever this is knows our surveillance system intimately, Wilson observed. More disturbing was what happened next. The figure approached Unit 3 and stood at the door for several minutes, apparently manipulating some electronic device invisible to cameras. No keycard was used, but the door opened after manipulation, suggesting sophisticated electronic equipment capable of bypassing security systems. The person entered Unit 3 and remained inside for 37 minutes. When they emerged, they used the same camera avoidance techniques, eventually disappearing in areas where coverage was limited due to architectural constraints. Thompson's investigation required careful balance between thoroughness and maintaining operational security. If word spread about suspected corruption, it could compromise ongoing operations and endanger witnesses whose safety depended on staff loyalty and professionalism. His first interview was with Dr. Patricia Hawkins, the facility psychologist scheduled to meet Castellano Monday morning. Dr. Hawkins was in her early 50s with gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd spent years treating traumatized witnesses whose psychological well-being had been shattered by criminal organizations. Thompson met with Dr. Hawkins in her office, designed to provide comfort and privacy during therapy sessions. The office contained comfortable furniture, calming artwork, and audio equipment ensuring conversations couldn't be overheard. Her desk held computer terminals providing access to psychological databases and communication systems for coordinating with mental health professionals throughout the Witness Protection Program. Castellano was scheduled for his weekly session at 9 a.m. Monday, Dr. Hawkins explained, consulting detailed appointment records. These sessions monitor his mental health and ensure continued cooperation with prosecutors. He'd shown increased anxiety over the past month, which isn't uncommon. The stress of protective custody, combined with knowing powerful organizations want him dead, can be overwhelming. Thompson recognized that witness psychology could provide crucial insights into Castellano's disappearance. Witnesses who became psychologically unstable might attempt to flee protective custody, believing they could better ensure their safety by disappearing rather than relying on federal protection. Had Castellano mentioned feeling threatened by anyone specifically? Concerns about facility staff, other witnesses, or outside contacts? Dr. Hawkins hesitated, balancing patient confidentiality with investigative cooperation. Agent Thompson, Michael had developed what I'd characterize as healthy paranoia. He suspected everyone, including me, normal for someone who'd betrayed an organization as powerful as the Torino family. 2 weeks ago, he asked directly if I thought there could be corruption within the facility. I told him such concerns were normal, but he seemed convinced someone here couldn't be trusted. The revelation that Castellano suspected internal corruption was significant. His disappearance might not have been voluntary, but could have resulted from discovering actual security breaches. Did he mention names or specific suspicions? No names, but he said something troubling, Dr. Hawkins replied. He claimed someone had been in his room while he slept. Said he could tell because personal items had been moved slightly, books repositioned, clothing disturbed. I attributed this to hypervigilance, common among trauma witnesses, but now, if accurate, someone with room access had been conducting unauthorized surveillance, gathering intelligence about his cooperation with federal authorities, or assessing his psychological state for purposes unrelated to protection. Thompson's next interview was with security officer Frank Johnson, who discovered Castellano's empty room. Johnson was a former military police officer in his early 40s, with rigid posture suggesting he'd never fully transitioned from military to civilian life. His personnel file showed exemplary Army Criminal Investigation Division service, including Iraq and Afghanistan deployments. I've conducted security rounds at Blackwater for 3 years, Johnson explained, consulting duty logs. Monday morning, I followed standard protocol exactly. Knocked on Castellano's door at 0800 to escort him to his psychology appointment. No answer. Announced myself, waited 30 seconds, then used my access card to check his welfare. Thompson noted Johnson's precise protocol adherence, suggesting either genuine professionalism or carefully rehearsed responses designed to avoid suspicion. What exactly did you observe in Castellano's room? Room was empty, but appeared normal, Johnson replied. Bed had been slept in, but roughly made. Personal belongings in usual locations, books on nightstand, clothes in closet, toiletries in bathroom. Emergency communication device on the nightstand where witnesses are instructed to keep it. No signs of struggle, no indication he'd packed for departure. No evidence of forced entry. The description fit either voluntary departure or carefully planned removal by someone with intimate knowledge of witness protection protocols. Had you noticed anything unusual about Castellano's behavior recently? Johnson's expression grew thoughtful. Actually, yes. About 2 weeks ago, he asked about access logs for his room. Wanted to know who could see records of when his door was opened and closed, whether someone could access his room without creating electronic records. I told him that information was classified above my clearance level. The revelation that Castellano had been asking specific questions about access logs was highly significant. It suggested he'd suspected unauthorized room access and had been trying to understand how such access might be concealed from security systems. Thompson realized he needed to expand his investigation beyond staff interviews. Evidence pointed toward a sophisticated operation involving multiple individuals with detailed knowledge of Blackwater's security systems and witness protection procedures. Chief Brown's technical analysis of the Unit 3 door lock revealed evidence transforming Thompson's investigation from a missing person case into a potential counterintelligence operation. The analysis required specialized equipment and expertise Brown had developed investigating electronic security breaches in federal facilities. Brown had completely dismantled the electronic lock system, examining every component under magnification and testing circuits for modification evidence. What he discovered was far more sophisticated than simple lock-picking. Someone had installed a professionally manufactured bypass device allowing the door to be opened without creating access logs or triggering security alerts. "Agent Thompson, this isn't amateur work," Brown explained, showing Thompson a tiny electronic component skillfully concealed within the lock mechanism. The device was smaller than a thumb drive, with circuitry appearing professionally manufactured. Whoever installed this had extensive knowledge of our specific lock models and access to specialized equipment unavailable through normal commercial channels. Thompson examined the device, noting sophisticated construction and professional circuitry appearance. The component appeared designed specifically for locks used throughout Blackwater, suggesting whoever manufactured it had detailed facility intelligence and had invested considerable resources developing bypass tools. How long would someone need to install this? "Minimum 2 hours, probably closer to 3, Brown replied, consulting technical manuals. They'd need to completely disassemble the lock mechanism, install the bypass device, test functionality, and reassemble everything invisibly. Most importantly, they'd need to disable tamper sensors during installation, which requires administrative override codes only 5 people possess." The implications were staggering. Someone with highest-level administrative access had spent hours modifying Castellano's door lock, installing equipment allowing repeated undetected entry. This wasn't spontaneous crime, but carefully planned operation suggesting systematic intelligence gathering. The bypass device installation indicated Castellano's disappearance had been planned well in advance. Perpetrators needed time to gather intelligence about his room assignment, study his routine, identify installation opportunities, and develop their removal plan. Such planning suggested professional intelligence operations rather than improvised criminal activity. Agent Wilson had been conducting parallel investigations into Level 5 personnel background files and financial records. His discoveries added concern layers, suggesting security breaches extended beyond unauthorized witness housing access. "Agent Thompson, I've been reviewing background files for all Level 5 personnel," Wilson reported. "Dr. Hawkins's file shows irregularities not initially flagged during security clearance processing. Her previous FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit position ended abruptly, with administrative concerns notation not further explained." Administrative concerns could encompass anything from minor policy violations to serious security breaches. The vague language suggested whatever prompted Dr. Hawkins's Blackwater transfer had been too sensitive for detailed documentation. "What about other Level 5 staff?" "Chief Brown's file appears clean, but there's something interesting about Director Miller," Wilson continued carefully. 3 months ago, he received preliminary inquiry from FBI Financial Crimes regarding unusual banking activity. Large cash deposits inconsistent with his federal salary, and transaction patterns triggering automated monitoring. The revelation that Miller had been flagged for suspicious financial activity was particularly troubling, given his facility command position and access to classified witness protection information throughout the western United States. Thompson realized his investigation was taking on counterintelligence operation characteristics, involving potential foreign intelligence services or sophisticated organized crime groups with nation-state level capabilities. The planning level, technical sophistication, and institutional penetration suggested operation development over months or years, representing systematic assault on the federal witness protection program. That evening, Thompson positioned himself in a concealed observation post monitoring corridors leading to witness housing units. He chose a maintenance area position providing clear sight lines while remaining outside security camera coverage that might reveal his presence to hostile operatives. At 2:17 a.m., Thompson's patience was rewarded when a figure in dark clothing emerged from a maintenance access door, moving through facility corridors with sophisticated camera avoidance techniques he'd observed in previous security footage. Thompson immediately began recording while maintaining concealment. The figure moved with obvious facility layout familiarity, security camera position knowledge, and patrol schedule awareness. They proceeded directly to Witness Housing Unit 7, standing at the door for several minutes while manipulating some electronic device. No access card was used, but the door opened after electronic manipulation. The person entered Unit 7 and remained inside approximately 20 minutes. When they emerged, they followed the same camera avoidance procedures, returning to the maintenance access door through which they'd originally entered. Thompson now had confirmation that Blackwater's security breaches were ongoing and systematic, rather than isolated incidents related only to Castellanos' disappearance. Someone was conducting regular unauthorized witness surveillance using sophisticated electronic equipment, gathering intelligence for purposes clearly hostile to federal law enforcement interests. Thompson's overnight surveillance operation provided crucial evidence that Blackwater's security breach wasn't limited to Castellanos' disappearance, but represented ongoing intelligence operations targeting multiple facility witnesses. The systematic, unauthorized access, combined with sophisticated technical methods, indicated federal law enforcement faced coordinated assault on the witness protection program by adversaries with substantial resources and professional intelligence capabilities. The following morning, Thompson contacted FBI headquarters through secure channels, bypassing all facility communications. He could no longer trust Blackwater's normal communication protocols, given the demonstrated sophistication of hostile operatives under investigation. Using his personal encrypted satellite device, Thompson established contact with Deputy Director Harold Baker, who oversaw all witness protection operations and had authority to authorize emergency countermeasures. Deputy Director Baker, I have reason to believe Blackwater has been systematically compromised by hostile intelligence operatives, Thompson reported, using coded language conveying situation severity without providing interceptable details. We have evidence of ongoing electronic surveillance, systematic security breaches, and potential facility personnel recruitment by adversaries with sophisticated technical capabilities. Baker's response was immediate, reflecting the gravity Thompson was describing. Federal Witness Protection Facility compromise represented one of the most serious security threats the Bureau could face, with implications extending beyond individual witness safety to encompass federal law enforcement operation integrity against organized crime, terrorism, and corruption. Agent Thompson, I'm dispatching a full counterintelligence team immediately. They'll have advanced surveillance detection equipment and personnel trained in identifying and neutralizing hostile intelligence operations. Continue your investigation, but assume all facility communications and personnel are potentially compromised. Use only Bureau-issued encrypted devices for sensitive communications. While waiting for the counterintelligence team, Thompson conducted additional surveillance operations to gather intelligence about hostile operation scope and identify additional facility personnel potentially involved in the conspiracy. Thompson established a new observation post providing coverage of different facility areas, including administrative offices, housing personnel records, and operational planning information. If hostile operatives were gathering witness intelligence, they'd likely need access to administrative systems containing detailed witness background information, their cooperation with federal prosecutors, and the criminal organizations they'd betrayed. At 1:43 a.m., Thompson's surveillance was rewarded when he observed Dr. Patricia Hawkins emerging from her residential quarters, moving through the facility using camera avoidance techniques he'd observed during previous unauthorized access incidents. Dr. Hawkins was dressed in dark clothing, moving with obvious security camera position knowledge, indicating either extensive security system study or inside information from someone with classified security access. Thompson followed Dr. Hawkins at distance, maintaining visual contact while ensuring his presence remained undetected. She proceeded through facility corridors toward Witness Housing Unit 12, employing what appeared to be the same electronic bypass device Thompson had observed in previous incidents. The door opened without visible access card use, and Dr. Hawkins entered. Thompson could hear muffled conversation from inside Unit 12, indicating Dr. Hawkins was meeting with the housed witness rather than simply conducting surveillance or intelligence gathering. The conversation continued approximately 30 minutes, during which Thompson maintained surveillance position and documented the incident with night vision recording equipment. When Dr. Hawkins emerged from Unit 12, she didn't return to residential quarters as expected. Instead, she proceeded toward facility administrative offices, moving through corridors housing computer systems containing classified witness protection information, operational planning databases, and communication equipment for coordinating with FBI headquarters and other federal agencies. Dr. Hawkins entered the records office using apparent legitimate access credentials, but her administrative area presence during early morning hours clearly violated facility protocols, restricting sensitive area access based on duty assignments and operational necessity. Thompson observed her spending considerable time accessing computer terminals containing classified information before leaving the facility entirely through a service exit supposed to be secured during nighttime hours. Observing Dr. Hawkins leaving the facility during unauthorized hours represented critical security breach, indicating potential classified information transmission to outside parties. Facility personnel were restricted to the compound during duty assignments, and unauthorized departure violated multiple federal regulations designed to prevent witness protection operation compromise. The FBI counterintelligence team's arrival the next morning brought specialized expertise and equipment transforming Thompson's investigation into full-scale operation designed to identify and neutralize the hostile intelligence network that had penetrated Blackwater. The team was led by Special Agent Edward Clark, a veteran foreign intelligence investigator with extensive experience identifying and neutralizing hostile intelligence operations within federal agencies. Agent Thompson, your preliminary investigation has uncovered what appears to be sophisticated penetration operation conducted by adversaries with substantial resources and professional intelligence capabilities, Clark reported after reviewing Thompson's findings. We're treating this as potential national security threat involving either foreign intelligence services or organized crime groups with nation-state level capabilities. Clark's team immediately implemented electronic surveillance of all facility communication systems, deploying equipment that could intercept and decrypt unauthorized transmissions while monitoring normal facility operations for intelligence gathering evidence or outside party coordination. Within hours, they'd identified additional evidence confirming Thompson's security breach scope assessment. We've detected encrypted communications being transmitted from the facility to external servers in offshore jurisdictions known for hosting criminal financial operations, Clark reported. Transmissions originate from administrative office computer systems and contain what appears to be classified witness protection information, including detailed psychological profiles, cooperation agreements, and operational planning documents. The encrypted communications interception represented the smoking gun Thompson's investigation had been seeking. Evidence demonstrated that classified information was being systematically gathered and transmitted to hostile outside parties, confirming Blackwater had been penetrated by organized intelligence operation rather than simply experiencing isolated security incidents. Technical analysis of intercepted communications also revealed Dr. Hawkins wasn't operating alone. Encrypted messages included references to other facility personnel and coordination with external contacts, suggesting a network involving multiple individuals with different specialties and access to various facility operation aspects. Agent Thompson, we've identified at least 4 facility personnel apparently involved in this operation, Clark continued. Besides Dr. Hawkins, we have evidence implicating Chief Brown, Security Officer Johnson, and Administrative Assistant Sarah Collins. Communications suggest they've operated as coordinated network for at least 18 months. The FBI counterintelligence team's sophisticated electronic surveillance capabilities quickly revealed the conspiracy's true scope at Blackwater, exposing a network extending far beyond simple, unauthorized witness housing access. Encrypted communications intercepted by Agent Clark's team, once subjected to advanced cryptographic analysis by FBI technical specialists, painted a chilling picture of systematic betrayal, threatening the Federal Witness Protection Program's foundation. Agent Thompson, you need to examine these decrypted communications immediately, Special Agent Clark said, displaying cryptographic analysis results on secure computer terminals established in a specially configured command center, isolated from normal facility systems. Dr. Hawkins has been providing detailed witness psychological profiles to external contacts, including information about mental health vulnerabilities, testimony fears, and assessments of their likelihood to recant under pressure. The decrypted messages revealed the conspiracy was far more sophisticated and dangerous than Thompson had initially suspected. Rather than simply gathering intelligence for traditional organized crime witness retaliation, the network was conducting psychological warfare operations designed to systematically undermine witnesses' willingness to cooperate with federal prosecutors through targeted intimidation campaigns, exploiting their deepest fears and psychological vulnerabilities. Transmitted psychological profiles included detailed witness-family relationship assessments, post-testimony safety concerns, financial vulnerabilities, and psychological stress responses. This information was being used to design individualized intimidation campaigns that could break witness resolve without resorting to direct violence that might trigger federal law enforcement responses. One particularly disturbing message series indicated the conspiracy had already achieved significant success undermining federal prosecutions through witness psychological manipulation. 2 high-profile organized crime cases had collapsed when key witnesses recanted testimony after being subjected to sophisticated intimidation campaigns designed using psychological intelligence gathered by Dr. Hawkins and her network. External contacts are using psychological intelligence to conduct precision intimidation operations, Clark explained, pointing to specific communications detailing how witness vulnerabilities were being exploited. They're threatening family members in ways exploiting specific fears, manipulating financial situations to create stress, and conducting surveillance operations designed to make witnesses feel constantly watched and never truly safe. Agent Wilson's financial investigation had been proceeding parallel with technical analysis, and his discoveries revealed the scope of payments being made to corrupted facility personnel. Advanced financial forensics had traced money through complex shell company networks, offshore accounts, and cryptocurrency transactions designed to obscure ultimate funding sources. The payment structure is extremely sophisticated, Wilson reported, displaying financial flowcharts mapping money movement from criminal organizations to corrupted facility personnel. Dr. Hawkins has received over $400,000 in payments over 18 months, while Chief Brown received approximately $300,000. Payments are made through cryptocurrency exchanges, offshore banking systems, and legitimate business transactions almost impossible to detect without advanced financial forensics capabilities. Financial investigation also revealed the conspiracy was being funded by multiple criminal organizations rather than a single group, suggesting coordinated effort among various organized crime families, international trafficking networks, and possibly foreign intelligence services. The coordination level required for such operation indicated federal law enforcement adversaries have developed unprecedented capabilities for organizing multifaceted witness protection program attacks. Thompson studied financial evidence with growing alarm. Recognizing funding scope indicated the Blackwater operation was likely just one component of a larger federal law enforcement capability assault. Criminal organizations that could coordinate such sophisticated operations and provide such substantial funding demonstrated nation-state level capabilities for conducting intelligence operations against government targets. Agent Clark, we need to understand how this network was recruited and whether similar operations are being conducted at other federal facilities, Thompson said, recognizing Blackwater conspiracy implications extended far beyond a single facility. The sophistication and coordination level suggests federal law enforcement faces organized campaign rather than isolated corruption incidents. Clark's response confirmed Thompson's worst fears about federal law enforcement threat scope. We've been conducting discrete inquiries with other witness protection facilities, and we've identified suspicious patterns at 3 additional locations. It appears hostile forces have been conducting systematic recruitment operations, targeting federal personnel with classified witness protection information access. The revelation that multiple federal facilities had been penetrated represented a national security crisis, threatening federal law enforcement operation effectiveness against organized crime, terrorism, and corruption. If criminal organizations could systematically compromise witness protection operations, they could effectively neutralize one of law enforcement's most powerful tools for prosecuting complex criminal enterprises. The investigation team decided to implement carefully controlled operation designed to identify the full network extent, while gathering evidence that could be used to prosecute conspirators and dismantle their external support structure. Rather than immediately arresting known Blackwater conspirators, they would monitor their activities and attempt to identify external contacts and any additional facility personnel who might be involved. We need to understand this operation's complete structure before dismantling it, Clark explained. If we move too quickly, we might miss other conspirators, fail to identify external contacts receiving classified information, or trigger contingency plans that could endanger other witnesses or destroy broader criminal operation evidence. The controlled operation required sophisticated surveillance and deception techniques designed to monitor conspirators' activities without alerting them that their operations had been discovered. Clark's team deployed advanced electronic surveillance equipment that could intercept communications without detection, while behavioral specialists analyzed conspirators' activity patterns to predict future operations. Over the next 48 hours, controlled surveillance operation revealed additional disturbing information about conspiracy scope and Michael Castellano's fate. Intercepted communications indicated Castellano hadn't been killed immediately upon disappearance, as Thompson had initially feared. Instead, he'd been transferred to a secure location controlled by the hostile network, where he was being subjected to intensive psychological pressure designed to force testimony recantation against the Torino crime family. They're not simply eliminating witnesses, Thompson realized, studying intercepted communications. They're trying to destroy legal cases built on witness testimony by forcing public recantations that would discredit entire federal prosecutions. From their perspective, a witness who publicly recants and claims to have lied under federal pressure is more valuable than a dead witness who might be seen as a martyr. The psychological warfare approach employed by the network represented sophisticated understanding of federal legal procedures and public relations considerations that could influence jury attitudes toward witness testimony. By forcing witnesses to publicly recant and claim federal prosecutors had coerced false testimony, the network could potentially invalidate years of federal law enforcement work and secure convicted criminal release who could return to power positions within their criminal organizations. Agent Clark's technical specialists had also identified the location where Castellano was being held, using signal analysis and geographic tracking of communications intercepted from the network. The location was a private compound approximately 40 miles from Blackwater, situated in an isolated area, allowing the network to conduct psychological operations without law enforcement interference or civilian witness observation. We have a narrow opportunity window to rescue Castellano and gather evidence about this network's external structure, Clark explained to Thompson. Our surveillance indicates Castellano is still alive and conscious, but communications suggest they're planning to move him to a different location within 24 hours. We need to coordinate a rescue operation while simultaneously arresting Blackwater conspirators. At 4:30 a.m. on Thompson's sixth day at Blackwater, a carefully orchestrated operation began that would determine Michael Castellano's fate and expose the full conspiracy scope that had penetrated the federal witness protection program. FBI tactical teams, supported by specialized counterintelligence personnel and equipped with advanced surveillance and communications equipment, positioned themselves around both the Blackwater facility and the remote compound where Castellano was being held. The operation required precise timing and coordination between multiple teams operating in different locations, with communications maintained through encrypted channels that couldn't be intercepted by the hostile network. Thompson and Agent Wilson were assigned to lead the Blackwater arrest operation, while Agent Clark coordinated the compound rescue mission. Both operations needed to proceed simultaneously to prevent either conspirator group from alerting the other and potentially triggering contingency plans that could endanger Castellano or compromise other witnesses. Thompson's first priority was confronting Dr. Patricia Hawkins, whom surveillance had identified as the conspiracy's operational leader within Blackwater, and the individual responsible for gathering psychological intelligence being used to conduct witness intimidation campaigns. The confrontation needed careful management to prevent Hawkins from alerting other network members or activating any communication protocols that might warn external contacts about the federal law enforcement response. They located Dr. Hawkins in her office, where she appeared to be conducting routine administrative work related to witness psychological evaluations. Her calm demeanor and professional appearance suggested she had no awareness that her covert activities had been discovered, and that a comprehensive federal investigation had identified the full scope of her conspiracy involvement. Dr. Hawkins, we need to speak with you about some irregularities we've discovered in witness protection protocols and psychological evaluation procedures, Thompson began, using language designed to avoid immediate alarm while establishing the serious nature of the federal investigation that was underway. Hawkins's initial reaction was entirely professional and consistent with someone being asked to assist with routine administrative investigation. She appeared cooperative and expressed appropriate concern about potential facility operation irregularities. However, as Thompson began asking increasingly specific questions about her nighttime activities, unauthorized witness housing access, and facility computer system use for purposes unrelated to official duties, her demeanor changed dramatically. I think I should contact my attorney before continuing this conversation, Hawkins said, her voice taking on a defensive edge, suggesting she understood the implications of questions being asked and recognized she was being investigated for serious federal crimes. Dr. Hawkins, you're not under arrest at this time, but I should inform you that we have extensive evidence of your involvement in unauthorized federal witness surveillance, systematic facility security protocol breaches, and classified information transmission to unauthorized recipients, Thompson said, employing an interrogation technique designed to demonstrate federal case strength while encouraging cooperation. The psychological approach Thompson had chosen proved immediately effective. Hawkins was a mental health professional who understood both the legal implications of evidence being described and the psychological techniques being employed to encourage her cooperation. Her professional training allowed her to recognize that continued denial would be ineffective, given the evidence scope federal investigators had apparently gathered. After several minutes of internal struggle, during which Thompson could observe her calculating potential consequences of different responses, Hawkins began providing conspiracy information, and her involvement in activities she clearly understood constituted serious federal crimes. The Torino crime family approached me approximately 18 months ago through intermediaries who had conducted extensive research on my financial situation, professional background, and personal vulnerabilities, Hawkins admitted, her voice taking on the flat, resigned tone of someone who understood that cooperation represented her only option for potentially mitigating legal action consequences. Thompson continued interrogation with careful attention to gathering intelligence that could save Castellano's life and identify the external criminal network structure that had recruited facility personnel. He understood Hawkins's cooperation could provide crucial information about where Castellano was being held, the number of people involved in his detention, and the timeline for planned actions that might threaten his safety. Dr. Hawkins, we have evidence that Michael Castellano is being held at a location outside this facility, and his life may depend on your willingness to provide accurate information about where he's being held, who's guarding him, and what's planned for him, Thompson said, employing Castellano's situation urgency to encourage complete information disclosure that could facilitate his rescue. Hawkins's resistance collapsed entirely when confronted with the reality that her actions had directly contributed to the kidnapping and detention of a federal witness whose safety was her professional responsibility. She provided detailed compound information where Castellano was being held, including armed guard numbers, implemented security measures, and his planned relocation timeline to a different facility. They're not planning to kill him immediately, Hawkins revealed, providing information crucial to understanding the criminal network's strategy. The Torino family wants him to publicly recant his testimony in a way that will discredit the entire federal investigation and potentially invalidate convictions obtained based on his cooperation. They believe public recantation is more valuable than simply eliminating him, because it would undermine public confidence in the Witness Protection Program. While Thompson was conducting Dr. Hawkins's interrogation, Agent Clark's tactical team was executing the rescue operation at the remote compound, which had been identified through signal analysis and surveillance of encrypted communications intercepted from the network. The compound was located in an isolated area surrounded by agricultural land, with limited access roads making covert approach challenging but also restricting options available to hostiles for escape or reinforcement. The tactical team encountered armed resistance from several guards positioned around the compound's perimeter, but federal agents' superior training, equipment, and coordination allowed them to quickly neutralize threats without law enforcement casualties. The resistance confirmed the compound was being used for illegal activities, and that individuals guarding it were prepared to use violence to prevent federal law enforcement from discovering their operations. Agent Thompson, we've successfully secured the compound and located Castellano, Agent Clark reported through encrypted communications. He's alive and conscious, though he shows obvious signs of psychological and physical abuse designed to break his resistance. Medical personnel are providing immediate treatment, and we're gathering evidence from the facility that will help us understand the full scope of the criminal network's operations. Castellano was found in a basement room converted into a holding cell, equipped with sophisticated audio and video recording equipment, suggesting the criminal network had been documenting their psychological torture sessions, possibly for transmission to other witnesses as part of their intimidation campaigns. The room also contained detailed psychological profiles of multiple federal witnesses, indicating Castellanos' detention was part of a broader operation targeting witnesses throughout the federal system. Medical examination revealed Castellano had been subjected to systematic psychological torture designed to create mental instability that would undermine his credibility as a witness, even if he continued cooperating with federal prosecutors. The techniques employed were sophisticated and suggested the criminal network had access to professional psychological expertise and understanding of advanced interrogation and psychological manipulation methods. The torture wasn't designed simply to force a recantation, Castellano explained to Thompson during his initial post-rescue debriefing. They were trying to destroy my mental stability so that even if I continued to testify, juries would question my credibility and mental competence. It was psychological warfare designed to discredit the witness protection program itself by demonstrating that witnesses could be psychologically destroyed even while in federal custody. The coordinated arrests at Blackwater proceeded without incident, as the facility's isolated location and controlled environment allowed federal agents to apprehend Chief Brown, Security Officer Johnson, and Administrative Assistant Collins simultaneously, preventing any response coordination or evidence destruction that might be crucial to understanding the full criminal network scope. Evidence recovered during arrests included sophisticated encrypted communication devices, detailed financial records documenting payments from criminal organizations, comprehensive intelligence files on dozens of witnesses housed at Blackwater and other federal protection facilities, and technical equipment designed for conducting electronic surveillance and bypassing federal security systems. The evidence scope confirmed the conspiracy had been far more extensive and sophisticated than even Thompson's investigation had initially revealed, with implications extending throughout the federal witness protection program and potentially affecting hundreds of witnesses whose safety and cooperation with federal law enforcement had been compromised by systematic intelligence gathering operations conducted by the criminal network. 18 months after Thompson first arrived at Blackwater, the criminal prosecutions of facility management had concluded with convictions reflecting the severity of their crimes and sending a clear message about federal accountability for misconduct involving federal personnel. The sentences imposed by federal judges established important precedents for prosecuting officials who abuse their authority and endanger personnel under their supervision. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, as the conspiracy's operational leader and the individual responsible for gathering psychological intelligence used to conduct witness intimidation campaigns, received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Her limited cooperation with federal investigators, and prosecutors' successful argument that her betrayal of professional responsibilities and violation of trust placed in her by traumatized witnesses warranted maximum penalty under federal sentencing guidelines. Chief Walter Brown received 20 years in federal prison, reflecting his role in providing technical expertise that allowed the conspiracy to bypass facility security systems and his responsibility for maintaining electronic surveillance and access control systems supposed to protect federal witnesses. Security Officer Johnson was sentenced to 18 years, while Administrative Assistant Collins received 15 years, with sentences reflecting their different conspiracy involvement levels and cooperation with federal investigators during prosecution. Michael Castellanos' recovery from psychological trauma endured during detention required extensive treatment by federal medical and psychological specialists who were experts in treating sophisticated torture and psychological manipulation victims. The techniques employed against him were analyzed by federal behavioral specialists and used to develop new protocols for protecting witnesses who might be targeted for similar psychological warfare operations. The torture I experienced wasn't designed simply to break me, Castellano explained to Thompson during one of their post-rescue debriefing sessions. It was designed to create specific psychological symptoms that would make me appear unstable or unreliable as a witness. They wanted to destroy not just my willingness to testify, but my credibility and mental competence in ways that would undermine the entire federal case against the Torino organization. Despite endured psychological trauma, Castellano eventually resumed cooperation with federal prosecutors, though his testimony required special procedures designed to address psychological manipulation he'd experienced and demonstrate to juries that his mental state remained reliable despite suffered torture. His continued cooperation was crucial to maintaining federal prosecutions resulting from his original testimony, and his resilience facing sophisticated psychological warfare became an inspiration to other witnesses facing similar threats. The investigation also revealed troubling questions about organized crime infiltration scope into federal law enforcement agencies and sophisticated capabilities criminal organizations had developed for conducting intelligence operations against government targets. The resources and technical expertise demonstrated by the Torino family's operation suggested major criminal organizations had developed counterintelligence capabilities rivaling those of hostile foreign nations. What we discovered at Blackwater wasn't an isolated incident, Thompson reported to Deputy Director Harold Baker during comprehensive post-investigation briefing. It was evidence of systematic effort by organized crime groups to neutralize federal law enforcement's most effective tools against them. The sophistication level, financial resources involved, and coordination between different criminal organizations suggests we're facing adversaries with capabilities we haven't previously encountered. Reforms implemented in response to the Blackwater investigation included enhanced psychological screening procedures for facility staff designed to identify individuals who might be vulnerable to recruitment by hostile forces. Financial monitoring systems were improved to detect unexplained wealth or suspicious financial transactions that might indicate corruption or compromise. Regular counterintelligence assessments were instituted at all federal protection facilities, designed to identify potential infiltration attempts before they could compromise witness safety. Technical security measures were also comprehensively upgraded, including advanced encryption for all facility communications, improved electronic surveillance systems that could detect unauthorized access attempts, and redundant security protocols that would make it extremely difficult for hostile forces to compromise multiple security systems simultaneously. Personnel rotation policies were implemented to prevent facility staff from developing overly detailed security procedure knowledge that could be exploited by hostile recruitment efforts. Thompson's career trajectory was permanently altered by his success in uncovering and dismantling the Blackwater conspiracy. He'd demonstrated investigative skills and analytical capabilities necessary to identify sophisticated hostile intelligence operations, but he'd also gained sobering insights into the evolving nature of threats facing federal law enforcement in the 21st century. The investigation's psychological impact on Thompson was significant, as he'd learned that individuals entrusted with protecting the most vulnerable witnesses could be corrupted by criminal organizations with sufficient resources and sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques. The experience taught him that trust within federal law enforcement required constant verification through rigorous security procedures and continuous monitoring for compromise or corruption signs. The Blackwater case taught me that we can never assume our institutions are secure simply because they're staffed by people who've passed background investigations and psychological evaluations, Thompson reflected during his final investigation report. Criminal organizations have developed capabilities for identifying and exploiting human vulnerabilities that require us to constantly adapt our security procedures and remain vigilant against infiltration attempts. The case also highlighted psychological toll that witness protection work imposed on federal personnel, creating stress levels and psychological pressures that made individuals vulnerable to manipulation by hostile forces. The constant awareness that mistakes could result in witness assassinations created emotional burdens requiring ongoing psychological support and monitoring to prevent burnout or compromise. In his comprehensive final Blackwater investigation report, Thompson wrote, "The conspiracy we uncovered demonstrates that organized crime groups have developed sophisticated capabilities for infiltrating federal law enforcement agencies and conducting intelligence operations rivaling those of hostile foreign nations. Their operations are characterized by long-term planning, substantial financial resources, advanced technical capabilities, and professional psychological manipulation techniques. Federal witness protection requires not only physical security measures but also comprehensive counterintelligence operations designed to identify and neutralize infiltration and corruption attempts. Witness safety depends fundamentally on personnel integrity entrusted with their protection, and that integrity must be continuously verified through rigorous security procedures, recognizing the sophisticated nature of threats we face. The criminal organizations we investigate have demonstrated willingness to invest substantial resources in long-term operations designed to compromise federal law enforcement from within. Our response must include recognition that the battle between law enforcement and organized crime is evolving in ways requiring new approaches, enhanced vigilance, and continuous security procedure adaptation." The Blackwater investigation concluded with significant witness protection operation improvements throughout the federal system, but it also served as stark reminder that federal law enforcement operation effectiveness depended on continuous vigilance by personnel who understood they were engaged in ongoing battle against adversaries with sophisticated capabilities and substantial resources. Thompson's work had prevented catastrophic witness protection operation compromise that could have resulted in dozens of witness assassinations and major federal prosecution collapse. However, the investigation had also revealed that criminal organizations were developing capabilities posing unprecedented threats to federal law enforcement operations, requiring constant adaptation and security procedure improvement to maintain program effectiveness crucial to prosecuting the most dangerous criminal organizations threatening American society. The Blackwater investigation's legacy would influence federal law enforcement operations for years to come, establishing new protocols and procedures while serving as a reminder that federal witness protection required not only courage and dedication, but also unwavering commitment to the integrity and security of institutions entrusted with their safety. For Thompson, the case represented both professional triumph and sobering education in modern law enforcement realities, demonstrating that stakes in the battle between law enforcement and organized crime were constantly escalating, and that success required continuous vigilance, professional excellence, and institutional integrity at the highest levels. At 41, Special Agent Richard Davis had reached that critical stage of his FBI career, where certain assignments carried implications far beyond the immediate task. When the encrypted message arrived on a February morning in 2023 at the Phoenix field office, Davis recognized the weight behind it immediately. 18 years with the Bureau had taught him to read between the lines of official communications, and this one bore classification markings that commanded respect and caution. The message came directly from the Bureau's training division at Quantico, requesting his immediate evaluation of training protocols at something called Sierra 9. Davis had never heard of the facility, which in itself was significant. At his level, with his security clearance, there weren't many FBI operations that remained unknown to him. The assignment could define the rest of his career trajectory, or derail it entirely if he mishandled what was clearly a sensitive situation. Davis understood the Bureau's unwritten rules about advancement. Agents in their 40s faced crucial decisions about their professional futures. Play it safe, avoid making waves, and secure a comfortable path to retirement with full pension benefits. Or take on the kind of high-stakes assignments that could either accelerate promotion to senior positions or result in career-ending conflicts with powerful superiors. This evaluation felt like one of those crossroads. The coordinates placed Sierra 9 in the Mojave Desert, approximately 180 miles northeast of Los Angeles, in terrain so remote that the nearest civilian population was over 40 miles away. Davis had evaluated other federal training facilities during his career, but none had required this level of operational security or geographical isolation. The facility had been established in 2019 as part of enhanced counterterrorism training, designed to prepare agents for operations that could break ordinary people. Sierra 9 specialized in what the Bureau called extreme isolation protocols, training designed to test agents' psychological resilience under conditions simulating deep undercover operations, extended surveillance missions in hostile territories, and situations where they might be cut off from support for months. These were the kinds of assignments that could make careers for those who succeeded, but destroy those who couldn't handle the pressure. Davis's assignment was to evaluate whether Sierra 9's training protocols were producing enhanced agent capabilities or creating psychological damage that could compromise long-term effectiveness. The inquiry had been prompted by concerns from the Bureau's medical division about elevated rates of psychological problems among agents who'd completed training there. Relationship difficulties, sleep disorders, anxiety, and behavioral changes suggesting potential trauma rather than enhanced resilience. The drive to Sierra 9 provided time for Davis to consider the implications of this assignment. At his age, with pension eligibility still years away, he couldn't afford to make enemies among the training division's leadership. Senior Bureau officials had invested significant resources in Sierra 9, and if his evaluation uncovered serious problems, he might be viewed as a threat to institutional interests rather than a professional conducting objective analysis. The facility itself was almost invisible until Davis was within a few hundred yards of the main gate. Buildings constructed with desert camouflage blended seamlessly with the natural landscape, making detection from aircraft or satellite surveillance extremely difficult. Solar panels and wind generators provided power independence, while deep wells supplied water from underground aquifers. Everything about Sierra 9 reinforced the isolation that was central to its training mission. Security protocols at Sierra 9 exceeded those Davis had encountered at other classified federal facilities. Guards verified his credentials through multiple systems, including biometric identification and encrypted communication with FBI headquarters. His personal vehicle was thoroughly searched, and all electronic devices except Bureau-issued encrypted equipment were confiscated. The message was clear. This facility operated under extraordinary security measures. Director George Anderson represented a type Davis had encountered throughout his federal career. Former military officers who transitioned to civilian law enforcement but retained their military mindset. At 53, Anderson brought the systematic approach of a Marine colonel to what was essentially a psychological laboratory designed to test human limits. His confidence in Sierra 9's methods was immediately evident. but Davis had learned to be cautious around administrators who seemed too certain about controversial programs. Agent Davis, our mission at Sierra 9 is identifying agents with the psychological resilience necessary for the most demanding counterterrorism and intelligence operations, Anderson explained during their initial tour. We simulate conditions agents might face during deep undercover operations, extended surveillance missions, and situations where they might be captured or isolated from support indefinitely. The training areas Davis observed looked like sets from a psychological thriller. Mock urban environments could be configured to represent different international settings, while wilderness survival areas tested agents' ability to operate independently for extended periods. Most disturbing were specialized facilities designed to simulate the psychological stress of hostile interrogation and prolonged isolation. The training protocols at Sierra 9 were unlike anything Davis had encountered in his federal career. Agents underwent weeks of isolation training, where they were cut off from all outside communication and subjected to psychological stress designed to test their ability to maintain operational effectiveness under extreme conditions. The training included simulated interrogation, sensory deprivation, sleep disruption, and social isolation that could last for weeks. The psychological stress is intentional and carefully monitored, Anderson continued, though Davis detected a defensive edge in his voice. We're preparing agents for operations where they might face similar stress from hostile forces. Better to discover psychological vulnerabilities in a controlled training environment than during real operations where lives depend on agent stability. Davis's initial briefing included statistics that were both impressive and troubling. Agents who completed Sierra 9 training showed enhanced performance in subsequent counterterrorism operations, with measurably improved ability to maintain operational security under stress. However, the same agents also showed elevated rates of relationship difficulties, sleep disorders, and anxiety, psychological issues that could compromise their long-term effectiveness and personal well-being. The challenge we face, Anderson admitted during their private discussion, is distinguishing between temporary stress responses that indicate effective training and psychological damage that might compromise agents' long-term effectiveness. The Bureau wants agents who can handle extreme stress, but we can't afford to damage our people in the process. Davis understood that his evaluation would need to address not only the immediate effectiveness of Sierra 9's protocols, but also their long-term impact on agent welfare and career sustainability. At his stage of life, he'd seen too many colleagues whose careers had been derailed by institutional decisions that prioritized short-term objectives over personnel welfare. Davis's second day at Sierra 9 began with observation of the facility's most controversial training protocol. Extended isolation exercises conducted in specially designed chambers that could simulate the psychological stress of prolonged captivity or deep undercover operations. These isolation chambers represented sophisticated psychological equipment designed by specialists who'd studied the effects of solitary confinement on human behavior and mental stability. The chambers could be configured to provide complete sensory deprivation, with soundproof walls, controlled lighting simulating different environmental conditions, and climate control replicating temperature and humidity of various international locations where agents might be deployed. More disturbing was their ability to provide sensory overload, with speakers generating continuous noise, lighting that could strobe randomly, and temperature fluctuations designed to prevent psychological equilibrium. The isolation protocol is based on research into psychological techniques used by hostile intelligence services and terrorist organizations, explained Dr. Harold Baker, the facility's chief psychologist, a man in his late 40s with extensive experience in military and intelligence psychological operations. We're preparing agents for the worst conditions they might face if captured, or if they need to maintain deep cover in hostile environments. Agent Edward Clark was currently in his 4th day of isolation training, confined to a chamber configured to simulate complete sensory deprivation. Monitoring equipment tracked his vital signs, stress hormones, and brain activity, while hidden cameras recorded his behavior for psychological analysis. Dr. Baker's team was particularly interested in how different agents responded to complete absence of external stimuli and whether they could maintain psychological stability without normal human interaction. "Clark is one of our strongest candidates," Dr. Baker noted, reviewing psychological monitoring data displayed on multiple screens. "He has extensive military experience with hostile environments, and his psychological evaluations indicated exceptional mental resilience. If anyone should handle extended isolation, it would be someone with his background." However, the monitoring data told a different story. Clark's stress hormone levels had been steadily increasing over 4 days, and his behavior patterns showed signs of developing psychological instability. He'd begun talking to himself frequently, engaging in repetitive behaviors suggesting obsessive-compulsive responses to stress, and showing signs of paranoid thinking about facility staff and training purposes. Davis watched the video feeds with growing concern as Clark paced repeatedly around the small chamber, checking and rechecking the door mechanism, and engaging in conversations with imaginary presences suggesting he was beginning to lose touch with reality. The psychological monitoring equipment indicated his mental state was deteriorating rapidly, but Dr. Baker's team seemed to view this as valuable data rather than evidence that training was causing psychological damage. "We're gathering crucial information about psychological breaking points of highly trained agents," Dr. Baker explained when Davis questioned whether Clark's deteriorating condition warranted immediate intervention. "This data will help us develop better preparation protocols for agents who might face similar conditions in real-world operations." Davis's law enforcement experience had included training in recognizing signs of psychological trauma and mental instability. Clark's behavior exhibited clear indicators of acute psychological distress requiring immediate intervention. The fact that Dr. Baker's team was treating this obvious psychological crisis as a research opportunity rather than a medical emergency raised serious questions about the ethical boundaries of Sierra 9's training program. "Dr. Baker, Agent Clark appears to be experiencing a psychological crisis that could result in permanent mental damage," Davis said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen the long-term effects of psychological trauma on law enforcement personnel. "What are your protocols for preventing training exercises from causing permanent psychological harm?" Dr. Baker's response revealed a troubling gap between the facility's stated mission of preparing agents for hostile environments and the actual psychological welfare of agents undergoing training. "Agent Davis, we have to balance agent welfare against the need to prepare them for operations where they might face far worse conditions. If we intervene too quickly, we might miss opportunities to help agents develop genuine psychological resilience." The conversation was interrupted by alarms from monitoring equipment indicating Clark's psychological state had deteriorated to levels posing immediate health risks. His heart rate had spiked to dangerous levels. Stress hormone readings indicated acute psychological trauma, and his behavior on video monitors showed signs of complete psychological breakdown. "We need to extract him immediately," Davis said, recognizing that Clark was experiencing the kind of psychological crisis that could result in permanent mental damage or immediate physical danger if not addressed quickly. Dr. Baker's team finally agreed to end Clark's isolation exercise, but their reluctance to intervene raised serious questions about their judgment and understanding of ethical boundaries that should govern training programs involving psychological stress. The extraction process revealed the extent of Clark's psychological deterioration. He was disoriented, paranoid about facility staff, and showed signs of dissociation suggesting his psychological foundation had been severely damaged. "Agent Clark, you're safe now. The training exercise is over," Davis said, trying to provide reassurance to someone clearly struggling to distinguish between reality and the psychological stress he'd endured. Clark's responses indicated the isolation training had pushed him beyond his psychological limits into territory constituting genuine trauma rather than effective preparation for hostile environments. Medical evaluation revealed physical symptoms accompanying Clark's psychological breakdown: elevated blood pressure, stress-related digestive problems, and neurological responses indicating his nervous system had been severely impacted by prolonged psychological stress. Dr. Baker's team had been monitoring these developing health problems, but had continued the exercise, despite clear evidence it was causing physical as well as psychological damage. "This is exactly the kind of information we need," Dr. Baker insisted, even as medical personnel treated Clark for acute stress-related health problems. "We've identified Clark's psychological breaking point and gathered data about how extended isolation affects agents with his background. This information will be invaluable for developing better training protocols." Davis recognized that Dr. Baker's perspective represented a fundamental misunderstanding of law enforcement training, purposes, and ethical boundaries. The goal should be enhancing agents' capabilities while maintaining their psychological and physical health, not deliberately breaking down their mental defenses in the name of research or preparation for hostile environments. The incident with Clark wasn't isolated. Davis's review of training records revealed several other agents in recent classes had experienced similar psychological breakdowns, with varying degrees of permanent psychological damage resulting from training protocols that seemed designed more to test limits of human psychological endurance than to prepare agents for effective law enforcement operations. Davis's investigation took a crucial turn when he began interviewing training instructors who conducted day-to-day psychological stress protocols at Sierra 9. These individuals had intimate knowledge of how training affected participating agents, and had observed the full range of psychological responses to the facility's isolation and stress procedures. Their perspectives would be crucial to understanding whether the problems Davis was observing represented isolated incidents or systematic issues with the training program. The senior training instructor was Agent William Turner, a former military interrogation specialist who transferred to the FBI after 15 years conducting psychological operations for military intelligence. Turner was in his mid-40s, with the controlled intensity that came from years of working with psychological stress as a professional tool. His experience included training with some of the military's most advanced psychological operations units, and his expertise in psychological manipulation techniques had made him a valuable asset for preparing FBI agents to resist hostile interrogation. "Agent Davis, I understand you have concerns about our training methods," Turner said as they met in his office, decorated with military commendations and photographs from various international deployments. "I want you to understand that everything we do here is based on proven psychological techniques designed to help agents develop genuine resilience rather than just theoretical knowledge about hostile environments." Turner's explanation revealed a perspective that viewed psychological stress as a necessary component of effective preparation for hostile environments. His approach was based on the military concept of stress inoculation, the idea that controlled exposure to psychological pressure would help agents develop immunity to more severe stress in real-world operations. "The agents who come here are volunteers who've specifically requested assignment to the most dangerous counterterrorism operations," Turner explained. "They understand they're preparing for situations where they might be captured by terrorist organizations, subjected to sophisticated psychological torture, or required to maintain deep cover in hostile environments for months or years. Davis recognized the logical foundation of Turner's approach, but his observations of agents' responses suggested the theoretical benefits weren't being realized in practice. Instead of developing enhanced psychological resilience, many agents seemed to be experiencing genuine psychological trauma that could compromise their effectiveness and well-being for years to come. Instructor Turner: I've observed Agent Clark's response to isolation training, and his psychological breakdown appeared severe enough to cause permanent damage, Davis said. How do you distinguish between effective stress inoculation and psychological trauma that actually reduces an agent's operational capabilities? Turner's response revealed a troubling gap between theoretical understanding of psychological training and practical recognition of when that training was causing harm rather than benefit. Agent Davis, you have to understand that psychological breakdown during training is often a necessary step toward developing genuine resilience. If we stop training whenever agents experience stress responses, we'll never prepare them for the real psychological pressure they'll face in hostile environments. The conversation revealed Turner's fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between controlled stress that enhanced performance and uncontrolled psychological trauma that damaged mental health. His military background had exposed him to training environments where psychological pressure was viewed as acceptable regardless of long-term consequences. But federal law enforcement operated under different standards that prioritized personnel welfare alongside operational effectiveness. Davis interviewed other training instructors and found similar perspectives, suggesting the entire Sierra 9 training program was operating under philosophical assumptions inappropriate for federal law enforcement personnel. The instructors had been recruited primarily from military special operations backgrounds where psychological stress training followed different standards and served different purposes than FBI training should serve. Instructor Robert Martinez, a former Army Ranger with experience in psychological operations, explained his approach to stress training in terms that revealed the scope of philosophical problems with the Sierra 9 program. We're trying to break down agents' normal psychological defenses so we can rebuild them with enhanced resistance to hostile psychological manipulation. The breakdown phase is necessary and unavoidable if we want to achieve genuine psychological conditioning. Davis understood that Martinez's breakdown and rebuild approach might be appropriate for military personnel preparing for combat operations where psychological trauma was an inevitable risk, but it was completely inappropriate for federal law enforcement personnel who were supposed to maintain psychological stability while conducting complex investigations and working with civilian populations. The interview process also revealed that some instructors had their own concerns about training protocols, but had been discouraged from expressing those concerns through official channels. Instructor Sarah Thompson, a former FBI behavioral analyst assigned to Sierra 9 to provide psychological expertise, had repeatedly raised questions about the ethical boundaries of the training program, but had been told her concerns were based on insufficient understanding of operational requirements. I've seen agents experience psychological changes that go far beyond temporary stress responses, Thompson confided to Davis during a private conversation. Some of them are developing symptoms that look like post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm concerned we're causing permanent psychological damage rather than enhancing their operational capabilities. Thompson's perspective was particularly valuable because her background in FBI behavioral analysis gave her expertise in recognizing the difference between temporary stress responses and genuine psychological trauma. Her concerns about the training program had been documented in reports to facility management, but those reports had been dismissed as reflecting insufficient understanding of operational requirements. The problem is that facility management views any concerns about agent welfare as evidence of weakness or insufficient commitment to preparing agents for hostile environments, Thompson explained. There's pressure to continue pushing agents to their psychological limits regardless of evidence that we might be causing permanent damage. Davis's interviews with support staff revealed additional concerns about the training program that hadn't been communicated through official channels. Medical personnel had observed increasing numbers of stress-related health problems among training participants, but their recommendations for modified training protocols had been dismissed by facility management as interference with training objectives. Dr. Michael Roberts, the facility's medical officer, had documented patterns of stress-related illness among training participants, suggesting the psychological pressure was having significant physical health consequences. I've seen agents develop chronic sleep disorders, digestive problems, and cardiovascular issues that appeared directly related to the psychological stress of the training program, Dr. Roberts explained. The concerning thing is that many of these health problems persist after agents complete training and return to normal operations. We're not just seeing temporary stress responses that resolve after training. We're seeing long-term health consequences suggesting permanent damage to agents' physical and psychological well-being. The medical data provided crucial evidence that Sierra 9's training program wasn't achieving its stated objectives, but was instead causing measurable harm to participating agents. The pattern of health problems suggested training protocols were exceeding safe limits and causing damage that could compromise agents' long-term effectiveness and quality of life. On Davis's fourth day at Sierra 9, the facility experienced what would later be documented as the most serious training incident in its operational history. The crisis began during a routine advanced interrogation resistance exercise, where Agent Thomas Wilson was being subjected to psychological pressure techniques designed to test his ability to maintain operational security under hostile questioning. Wilson had been participating in the training program for 7 weeks and had shown increasing signs of psychological stress that had concerned some facility staff but had been dismissed by management as normal training responses. The exercise was conducted in a specially designed interrogation facility that could simulate psychological pressure agents might face if captured by terrorist organizations or hostile intelligence services. The facility included sophisticated audio and video equipment for recording sessions, environmental controls creating uncomfortable temperature and lighting conditions, and psychological pressure techniques developed based on analysis of hostile interrogation methods used by international terrorist and criminal organizations. Wilson had been subjected to 12 hours of continuous psychological pressure, including sleep deprivation, repetitive questioning, environmental stress, and psychological manipulation techniques designed to break down his resistance to providing information. The exercise was supervised by Instructor Turner and monitored by Dr. Baker's psychological assessment team, with safety protocols supposedly preventing permanent psychological damage while testing Wilson's ability to maintain operational security under extreme stress. The purpose of this exercise is to identify Wilson's psychological breaking point and help him develop techniques for maintaining operational security even when subjected to sophisticated psychological torture, Dr. Baker had explained to Davis before the exercise began. We need to know how much psychological pressure he can withstand and whether he has the mental resilience necessary for deep undercover operations in hostile environments. Davis had been observing the exercise from the monitoring room, where multiple screens displayed Wilson's psychological and physical responses to interrogation techniques being applied. The monitoring equipment showed increasing levels of psychological stress approaching dangerous thresholds, but Dr. Baker's team continued the exercise despite clear evidence Wilson was experiencing acute psychological distress. Wilson's responses to interrogation had become increasingly erratic over the 12-hour period, progressing from professional resistance techniques to signs of genuine psychological breakdown. He'd begun exhibiting paranoid thinking about facility staff, dissociative episodes where he seemed to lose awareness of his surroundings, and aggressive responses that seemed disproportionate to the actual stress being applied. Wilson's psychological defenses are breaking down exactly as expected, Dr. Baker observed as they watched Wilson's increasingly desperate responses to interrogation techniques. This is the critical phase where we can assess his fundamental psychological resilience and determine whether he has the mental strength necessary for operations where he might face similar pressure for weeks or months. Davis recognized that Wilson's responses indicated genuine psychological crisis rather than effective training outcomes. His law enforcement experience had included exposure to agents who'd experienced psychological trauma during real operations, and Wilson's behavior exhibited the same warning signs indicating immediate intervention was necessary to prevent permanent mental damage. Dr. Baker, Agent Wilson appears to be experiencing a psychological emergency requiring immediate medical intervention, Davis said, noting that Wilson's behavior had progressed beyond stress responses to symptoms indicating acute psychological trauma. His responses suggest we've crossed the line from training stress to actual psychological damage. The crisis escalated when Wilson suddenly became violent during the interrogation exercise, attacking Instructor Turner with sufficient force to cause serious physical injury before facility security could intervene. Wilson's attack appeared to be the result of a complete psychological break from reality, as he seemed to believe Turner was an actual hostile interrogator rather than a training instructor, and that the exercise was a genuine life-threatening situation rather than a controlled training environment. "This is not a normal training response," Davis said, as security personnel restrained Wilson, and medical staff provided immediate treatment for both Wilson and Turner. Agent Wilson has experienced a complete psychological breakdown that has resulted in him losing the ability to distinguish between training and reality. The incident required immediate emergency medical response, as Wilson continued to exhibit signs of acute psychological crisis, even after the interrogation exercise had been terminated. He remained convinced he was in genuine danger from hostile forces and couldn't be persuaded he was in a safe training environment. Medical evaluation revealed his psychological state had deteriorated to levels requiring immediate psychiatric intervention and raised serious questions about whether he'd ever be able to return to active law enforcement duty. Instructor Turner sustained injuries requiring emergency medical treatment and evacuation to a civilian hospital outside the facility. His injuries included a concussion and facial fractures requiring surgical repair, transforming what had been intended as a training exercise into a serious assault that could result in criminal charges if Wilson was determined to be legally responsible for his actions during his psychological breakdown. The facility's emergency response protocols revealed additional problems with Sierra 9's oversight and safety procedures. Despite the obvious severity of Wilson's psychological crisis, Dr. Baker initially resisted authorizing immediate psychiatric intervention, arguing that Wilson's responses might represent a temporary stress reaction that could resolve without outside medical intervention. "We need to be careful about how we respond to training stress," Dr. Baker argued, even as Wilson was being restrained by security personnel and was clearly in the midst of a severe psychological emergency. "If we overreact to psychological pressure responses, we might undermine the effectiveness of our training program and fail to prepare agents for the psychological stress they'll face in real operations." Davis understood that Dr. Baker's reluctance to acknowledge the severity of Wilson's condition represented a fundamental failure of medical and professional judgment that could result in permanent psychological damage to a federal agent. The incident had clearly progressed beyond any reasonable definition of training stress and required immediate psychiatric intervention, regardless of its potential impact on training objectives. The emergency psychiatric evaluation conducted by outside medical specialists confirmed Davis's assessment that Wilson had experienced a severe psychological breakdown constituting genuine mental trauma rather than a normal training response. The psychiatrists determined Wilson would require extended treatment, and that his prospects for returning to active law enforcement duty were uncertain at best. Agent Wilson has experienced what we would classify as acute stress-induced psychosis, explained Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the psychiatrist who conducted the emergency evaluation. His psychological responses indicate that training stress exceeded his mental capacity to cope, resulting in a complete breakdown of his ability to distinguish between perceived threats and actual reality. Following the violent incident involving Agent Wilson, Davis received authorization from FBI headquarters to conduct a comprehensive investigation into all aspects of Sierra 9's training program. The investigation revealed a pattern of psychological casualties that had been systematically concealed from higher-level FBI oversight through selective reporting and mischaracterization of training injuries as normal stress responses. The facility's medical records showed that over 4 years of operation, Sierra 9 had produced an alarming number of psychological casualties among participating agents. Of 147 agents who'd attempted to complete the full training program, 23 had been removed due to psychological problems. 31 had completed training but subsequently experienced significant mental health issues, and 8 had been placed on permanent medical leave due to stress-related disorders that appeared directly connected to their Sierra 9 training experience. These statistics represent a casualty rate that would be considered unacceptable in any other federal training program, Davis reported to Assistant Director Miller during a secure communications session. We're looking at nearly 40% of participants experiencing significant psychological problems that appear directly related to training protocols at Sierra 9. Dr. Patricia Coleman, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in law enforcement mental health issues, had been brought in to assist with Davis's investigation. Her review of medical and psychological records revealed patterns of trauma suggesting Sierra 9's training program was systematically exceeding safe limits for psychological stress and causing genuine mental health damage to participating agents. What we're seeing here is not stress inoculation or psychological conditioning, Dr. Coleman explained, as she reviewed case files documenting psychological casualties from Sierra 9 training. We're seeing evidence of systematic psychological trauma that is damaging agents' mental health and compromising their ability to function effectively in law enforcement operations. The investigation revealed that facility management had been aware of high casualty rates, but had attributed them to the demanding nature of counterterrorism operations rather than acknowledging that training protocols themselves might be causing problems. Reports to FBI headquarters had consistently minimized the severity of psychological problems and had characterized training casualties as evidence the program was successfully identifying agents who lacked psychological resilience necessary for demanding operations. The facility has been systematically misrepresenting the nature and severity of training casualties in their reports to headquarters, Davis discovered as he reviewed correspondence between Sierra 9 management and FBI oversight officials. They've been characterizing genuine psychological trauma as normal training stress and minimizing the long-term impact of mental health problems they're causing. Director Anderson's response to Davis's preliminary findings revealed the scope of leadership problems at Sierra 9. Rather than acknowledging evidence of systematic problems with the training program, Anderson defended the facility's protocols and argued that psychological casualties were acceptable given the demands of counterterrorism operations for which agents were being prepared. Agent Davis, you have to understand that we're preparing agents for operations where they might face psychological stress that makes our training look mild by comparison," Anderson argued during a heated discussion about the facility's casualty rates. "If we can't prepare agents to handle the psychological pressure of our training environment, how can we expect them to function effectively when they're facing genuine hostile interrogation or extended deep cover operations?" Davis recognized that Anderson's defense reflected the same fundamental misunderstanding that had characterized the entire Sierra 9 program: the assumption that causing psychological damage during training would somehow enhance agents' resilience in real operations. Evidence clearly indicated the opposite was occurring, with agents who experienced psychological trauma during training showing reduced effectiveness in subsequent operations rather than enhanced performance. The investigation also revealed that concerns about the training program had been raised by multiple sources over the years, but had been systematically dismissed or suppressed by facility management. Dr. Sarah Thompson's reports about agent welfare had been ignored. Medical recommendations for modified training protocols had been rejected, and agents who'd experienced psychological problems had been discouraged from discussing their experiences with other personnel. Agent Michael Foster, who'd completed Sierra 9 training 8 months earlier, provided crucial testimony about the long-term effects of the program and the pressure agents faced to conceal psychological problems. Foster had experienced severe anxiety, sleep disorders, and relationship difficulties following his training, but had been told by facility psychologists that these problems were normal adjustment issues that would resolve with time. The message was clear: if you had psychological problems after training, it meant you weren't tough enough for counterterrorism operations, Foster explained during his interview with Davis. There was tremendous pressure to minimize any difficulties you were experiencing and to avoid seeking help that might result in you being removed from advanced operations. Foster's experience revealed broader institutional problems that Sierra 9 had created within the FBI's counterterrorism operations. Agents who'd been psychologically damaged by training were reluctant to seek help because doing so might end their careers in specialized operations, creating a culture where mental health problems were concealed rather than treated. The investigation revealed that this culture of concealing psychological problems had contributed to operational failures and safety incidents in real-world counterterrorism operations. Several agents who'd experienced psychological trauma during Sierra 9 training had subsequently made serious errors during actual operations, including breaches of operational security, inappropriate responses to stress, and failures of judgment that had compromised investigations and endangered other personnel. Davis's investigation also revealed financial irregularities in Sierra 9's operation, suggesting potential corruption or misappropriation of the federal funds. The facility's budget included substantial payments to outside contractors who provided specialized psychological training services, but documentation for these services was incomplete, and the actual training provided appeared to be of questionable value. Davis's investigation took on criminal inquiry characteristics when he discovered that Sierra 9 facility management had been systematically destroying medical records and psychological evaluations, documenting the extent of training-related injuries among participating agents. The destruction of federal records constituted a serious federal crime, while concealment of medical information violated multiple regulations governing treatment and documentation of federal employee health issues. Evidence of records destruction was discovered when Davis attempted to review the complete medical file for Agent Jennifer Martinez, whose psychological breakdown had occurred 6 months after her Sierra 9 training. The file contained only routine medical information and brief psychological evaluations that minimized her post-training problems, but Dr. Coleman's interview with Martinez revealed she'd undergone extensive psychological treatment that should have been documented in her medical records. there should be detailed psychological evaluations, medical treatment records, and documentation of the relationship between Martinez's psychological problems and her Sierra 9 training, Dr. Coleman explained as they reviewed the incomplete medical file. The absence of this documentation suggests either systematic record-keeping failures or deliberate destruction of evidence that would document training-related injuries. Davis's investigation of the facility's record-keeping systems revealed sophisticated efforts to conceal the true extent of psychological casualties from Sierra 9's training program. Medical records had been selectively edited to remove references to training-related psychological problems, while psychological evaluations had been rewritten to minimize the severity of mental health issues and eliminate connections between psychological problems and specific training exercises. We're looking at systematic falsification of federal medical records, Davis reported to Assistant Director Miller during a secure communications session. Facility management has been deliberately concealing evidence of training-related psychological injuries to protect their program from oversight and potential termination. The investigation revealed that Dr. Baker had been the primary architect of the records falsification scheme, using his authority as the facility's chief psychologist to modify medical evaluations and psychological assessments in ways that concealed the true scope of training-related mental health problems. His modifications had been subtle but systematic, changing diagnostic codes, minimizing symptom descriptions, and eliminating references to specific training exercises that had caused psychological trauma. Baker has been systematically rewriting the psychological history of agents who experienced training-related trauma, Dr. Coleman observed as she analyzed patterns of record modification. He's been transforming documented cases of training-induced psychological damage into routine stress responses that wouldn't trigger oversight concerns. The scope of records falsification extended beyond individual psychological evaluations to include aggregate statistics reported to FBI headquarters about the overall effectiveness and safety of Sierra 9's program. Monthly and quarterly reports had consistently understated the number of agents who experienced psychological problems during training, and had mischaracterized the severity of those problems to make the program appear more successful than it actually was. Davis discovered that Director Anderson had been aware of and had actively participated in the falsification scheme, approving modified reports and providing false information to FBI oversight officials who'd made inquiries about the facility's casualty rates. Anderson's participation indicated the deception extended to the highest levels of facility management and represented a systematic effort to protect the program regardless of its impact on agent welfare. The investigation also revealed that the cover-up had extended to intimidation and retaliation against facility personnel who'd attempted to report problems with the training program. Dr. Sarah Thompson, the behavioral analyst who'd raised concerns about agent welfare, had been subjected to negative performance evaluations and had ultimately been transferred to a less desirable assignment after she persisted in documenting training-related psychological problems. Thompson was systematically punished for doing her job and attempting to protect agent welfare, Davis discovered as he reviewed personnel records and interviewed current and former facility staff. Her transfer was clearly retaliation for her efforts to document and report the psychological casualties that facility management wanted to conceal. Medical Officer Dr. Michael Roberts had experienced similar retaliation after he documented patterns of stress-related illness among training participants and recommended modifications to training protocols to reduce health risks. His medical recommendations had been ignored, and he'd been excluded from facility management meetings where decisions about training protocols were made. Davis's investigation reached a crucial breakthrough when he discovered that Agent Thomas Wilson, whose violent breakdown had triggered the current investigation, had been scheduled for memory modification therapy following his psychological crisis. The therapy was designed to help Wilson process and integrate his training experience in ways that would minimize his recollection of the specific events that had caused his breakdown. They were planning to tamper with Wilson's memory of his training experience to prevent him from providing accurate testimony about what caused his psychological breakdown, Dr. Coleman explained as she reviewed the treatment plan developed for Wilson. This represents an attempt to destroy evidence and prevent a federal agent from reporting training-related injuries. The memory modification therapy was being conducted by Dr. Richard Hayes, the same outside contractor who'd been providing questionable psychological training services to the facility and who had financial relationships with facility management. The therapy protocols were experimental and hadn't been approved by appropriate medical authorities, representing unauthorized medical experimentation on a federal agent suffering from training-related psychological trauma. Assistant Director Kenneth Miller's response to Davis's comprehensive investigation report was swift and decisive, reflecting the gravity of criminal conduct uncovered at Sierra 9 and the potential liability the misconduct created for the FBI and federal government. Within hours of receiving Davis's findings, Miller had authorized a full-scale criminal investigation led by the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, with coordination from the Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section. Agent Davis, your investigation has uncovered evidence of systematic criminal conduct that threatens the integrity of FBI training operations and has resulted in serious harm to federal personnel, Miller said during an emergency briefing at FBI headquarters. We're treating this as a priority criminal investigation with national security implications, given the potential impact on counterterrorism operations and federal law enforcement capabilities. The criminal investigation team included specialists in federal fraud, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations, reflecting the multiple federal crimes that appeared to have been committed by Sierra 9 facility management. The team was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Hayes, who had extensive experience prosecuting corruption cases involving federal officials and understood the complex legal issues raised by misconduct in federal training programs. The immediate priority was ensuring the safety and proper medical treatment of agents who'd been psychologically damaged by Sierra 9's training program, particularly Agent Thomas Wilson, whose violent breakdown had triggered the investigation. Wilson was transferred to a specialized federal medical facility where he could receive appropriate psychiatric treatment without interference from the individuals who'd caused his psychological trauma. Wilson's case represents our most serious immediate concern, explained Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the forensic psychiatrist leading Wilson's treatment team. He's experienced severe psychological trauma that may have resulted in permanent damage to his mental health and ability to function as a federal agent. His treatment requires specialized expertise and complete separation from the individuals and environment that caused his trauma. The criminal investigation also required immediate preservation of evidence at Sierra 9, as there was substantial reason to believe facility management would continue their efforts to destroy records and tamper with evidence if given the opportunity. Federal agents executed search warrants at the facility and seized all medical records, psychological evaluations, training materials, financial records, and electronic communications that might contain evidence of criminal conduct. We've secured extensive documentary evidence of the criminal conspiracy, including records that facility management attempted to destroy or falsify, reported Special Agent Robert Clark, who was leading the evidence preservation operation. We've also recovered electronic communications that document the scope of the cover-up and the financial relationships that motivated the criminal conduct. The search operation revealed additional evidence of the scope of facility management's criminal conduct, including sophisticated computer equipment that had been used to modify electronic medical records and communications equipment that had been used to coordinate the cover-up with outside contractors who were complicit in the scheme. Director George Anderson and Dr. Harold Baker were arrested on federal charges including conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, destruction of federal records, and violation of federal civil rights statutes. The arrests were conducted simultaneously to prevent coordination between the conspirators and to ensure that neither individual could flee or continue their efforts to destroy evidence. Anderson and Baker have been engaged in a criminal conspiracy that has defrauded the federal government of millions of dollars and has caused serious psychological harm to federal agents, announced U.S. Attorney David Wilson during a press conference about the arrests. Their conduct represents a betrayal of the trust placed in them as federal officials and a violation of their oath to protect and serve the American people. The criminal charges also extended to several outside contractors who had been complicit in the scheme, including Dr. Richard Hayes, whose company had received substantial federal payments for providing questionable training services while maintaining financial relationships with facility management that created obvious conflicts of interest. The investigation triggered comprehensive reforms to FBI training oversight procedures designed to prevent similar problems from occurring at other federal facilities. The reforms included enhanced medical monitoring of training participants, independent oversight of psychological stress protocols, and mandatory reporting requirements for training-related injuries. We're implementing the most comprehensive reforms to federal training oversight in FBI history, announced FBI Director Christopher Wray during a briefing about the Sierra 9 investigation. These reforms will ensure that training programs enhance agent capabilities rather than causing psychological damage, and that facility management is held accountable for the welfare of personnel under their supervision. The reforms included establishment of an independent medical oversight board with authority to suspend training programs that posed risks to participant welfare, mandatory psychological evaluations conducted by independent specialists who had no financial relationships with training facilities, and enhanced protections for whistleblowers who reported problems with federal training programs. Congressional oversight committees also launched investigations into the Sierra 9 scandal, with particular focus on how facility management had been able to conceal their criminal conduct from FBI oversight for years and what systemic failures had allowed the misconduct to continue without detection. The Sierra 9 case represents a massive failure of federal oversight that allowed criminal conduct to continue for years while federal agents were being systematically harmed, said Congressman James Thompson, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Crime and Federal Government Surveillance. We need to understand how this happened and what changes are necessary to prevent similar failures in the future. The congressional investigation revealed that FBI headquarters had received multiple reports over the years about problems at Sierra 9, but those reports had been systematically minimized or dismissed by officials who had financial or professional relationships with facility management. The pattern of ignored warnings indicated broader problems with FBI oversight procedures that extended beyond the specific failures at Sierra 9. The Sierra 9 investigation also prompted reviews of other federal training facilities to identify whether similar problems existed elsewhere in the federal law enforcement system. The reviews revealed concerning patterns at several other facilities, including elevated psychological casualty rates and questionable relationships between facility management and outside contractors. The problems at Sierra 9 were not isolated incidents, but represent broader systemic issues with federal training oversight, reported the FBI Inspector General during testimony before Congress. We're conducting comprehensive reviews of all federal training facilities to identify and address similar problems before they result in additional harm to federal personnel. 18 months after Agent Richard Davis first arrived at Sierra 9, the criminal prosecutions of facility management had concluded with convictions that reflected the severity of their crimes and sent a clear message about federal accountability for misconduct involving federal personnel. The sentences imposed by federal judges established important precedents for prosecuting officials who abuse their authority and endanger the personnel under their supervision. Director George Anderson received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison after being convicted on charges including conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal civil rights statutes. The sentence reflected the court's finding that Anderson had been the leader of the criminal conspiracy and had systematically abused his authority as a federal official to protect his personal interests at the expense of agent welfare. Anderson's conduct represents one of the most serious breaches of federal trust we have seen, declared Federal Judge Margaret Wilson during the sentencing hearing. He was entrusted with the safety and welfare of federal agents, and he systematically betrayed that trust in pursuit of his own financial and professional interests. His conduct endangered federal personnel and undermined the integrity of federal law enforcement operations. Dr. Harold Baker received a sentence of 10 years in federal prison, reflecting his role as the architect of the medical records falsification scheme and his systematic efforts to conceal evidence of training-related psychological injuries. The court found that Baker's abuse of his medical authority was particularly egregious because it violated his professional responsibilities to federal agents who were seeking his help for psychological problems. Dr. Baker violated the most fundamental principles of medical ethics by systematically falsifying medical records and concealing evidence of training-related injuries, Judge Wilson explained during Baker's sentencing. His conduct not only violated federal law, but also betrayed his professional responsibilities to the agents who trusted him with their medical care. The outside contractors who had been complicit in the scheme received sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years in federal prison, depending on their level of involvement in the criminal conspiracy. Dr. Richard Hayes, whose company had received over $200,000 in fraudulent contracts, received the longest sentence among the contractors and was permanently barred from receiving federal contracts. Agent Thomas Wilson's recovery from his psychological trauma proved to be more challenging than initially expected, highlighting the long-term consequences that inappropriate training could have on federal personnel. With proper psychiatric treatment and support from specialized medical professionals, Wilson was eventually able to return to limited federal law enforcement duties, though he remained permanently barred from participating in high-stress undercover operations. Wilson's case demonstrates both the resilience of federal agents and the importance of providing appropriate medical care when training-related injuries occur, explained Dr. Jennifer Martinez, who had led Wilson's treatment team. However, his case also shows that psychological damage from inappropriate training can have permanent consequences that affect an agent's career, prospects, and quality of life. The comprehensive reforms implemented in response to the Sierra 9 investigation transformed federal training oversight and established new standards for protecting personnel welfare during specialized training programs. The reforms included creation of an independent federal training safety board with authority to suspend programs that posed risks to participant welfare and to investigate training-related injuries. The Sierra 9 reforms represent the most significant changes to federal training oversight in FBI history, announced FBI Director Christopher Wray during the implementation of the new procedures. The new procedures eliminated the conflicts of interest that had allowed facility management at Sierra 9 to conceal evidence of training-related harm. Congressional oversight of the Sierra 9 investigation resulted in legislation that strengthened protections for federal employees participating in training programs and enhanced penalties for officials who abuse their authority or endanger personnel under their supervision. The legislation established new civil remedies for federal employees who suffered training-related injuries and created enhanced oversight procedures for specialized training programs. Agent Davis's career was significantly enhanced by his successful investigation of the Sierra 9 scandal, and he was promoted to a senior position in the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, where he continued to investigate misconduct involving federal training programs and oversight failures. His experience at Sierra 9 had provided him with unique expertise in identifying and investigating training-related misconduct. Davis's investigation prevented what could have been years of additional harm to federal agents and established important precedents for holding federal officials accountable for training-related misconduct, praised Assistant Director Kenneth Miller during Davis's promotion ceremony. His work demonstrates the importance of thorough investigation and the courage necessary to expose misconduct, even when it involves senior federal officials. The Sierra 9 investigation also prompted broader reforms to federal law enforcement training that extended beyond the FBI to include other federal agencies that conducted specialized training programs. The reforms established government-wide standards for training safety and created mechanisms for sharing information about training-related problems between different federal agencies. The long-term impact of the Sierra 9 investigation extended to academic and professional discussions about the appropriate limits of psychological stress training in law enforcement. The case became a standard reference point for discussions about training ethics and established important precedents for balancing training effectiveness with personnel welfare. For the agents who had been harmed by the Sierra 9 training program, the investigation and prosecutions provided a measure of justice and validation that their experiences represented genuine misconduct rather than personal failures. Many of the affected agents were able to receive appropriate medical treatment and compensation for their training-related injuries. The investigation vindicated our concerns and demonstrated that the problems we experienced were the result of systematic misconduct rather than our own inadequacies, explained Agent Jennifer Martinez, who had been able to return to federal law enforcement after receiving appropriate treatment for her training-related psychological problems. The Sierra 9 investigation concluded as one of the most significant cases of training-related misconduct in federal law enforcement history, establishing important precedents for accountability and reform while demonstrating the importance of thorough investigation when concerns are raised about federal training programs. The case served as a reminder that the protection of federal personnel requires constant vigilance and the courage to investigate and expose misconduct even when it involves senior officials and established programs. Davis's investigation had prevented what could have been years of additional harm to federal agents while establishing new standards for training oversight and accountability that would protect federal personnel for years to come. The case demonstrated that federal law enforcement's commitment to protecting those who serve the American people must include protecting federal agents from misconduct by their own colleagues and supervisors. For Davis personally, the Sierra 9 investigation represented both a professional triumph and a sobering education in the realities of institutional power and the courage required to challenge established systems. At 43, with his pension security now assured through his promotion, he understood that his willingness to confront powerful interests had defined not just this investigation, but the remainder of his federal career. The legacy of the Sierra 9 investigation would continue to influence federal training programs and oversight procedures, serving as a permanent reminder that the pursuit of training objectives must never compromise the welfare and rights of federal personnel who volunteer to serve in the most demanding and dangerous operations that protect American national security. The case had proven that institutional integrity required constant vigilance, professional courage, and an unwavering commitment to protecting those who dedicate their careers to serving the public interest. Special Agent Frank Johnson had spent 22 years with the FBI, long enough to recognize when something was fundamentally wrong with a crime scene. At 46, he'd investigated everything from white-collar fraud to domestic terrorism. But the call that came at 5:43 a.m. on March 15, 2024, would challenge everything he thought he knew about institutional corruption within federal law enforcement. The Federal Evidence Storage Facility, designation Secure Archive Bravo 12, was located 30 miles outside Washington, D.C., in the Virginia countryside. Most FBI agents never saw the inside of Bravo 12, and fewer still understood the scope of classified evidence housed there. Johnson had been selected for this assignment precisely because of his reputation for discretion and his ability to handle politically sensitive investigations without creating waves that could damage careers or compromise ongoing operations. At his stage of professional life, with 14 years remaining until retirement eligibility, Johnson understood the delicate balance between pursuing justice and protecting institutional stability. His pension and career security depended on maintaining the confidence of senior bureau leadership, but he also couldn't allow serious crimes to go uninvestigated simply to protect institutional interests. The facility contained evidence from the most significant federal investigations of the past 3 decades: documents, recordings, and physical evidence from cases involving organized crime, political corruption, international terrorism, and crimes that reached into the highest levels of American government and business. Material stored at Bravo 12 could bring down senators, expose international criminal conspiracies, and reveal connections between legitimate institutions and criminal organizations that the public was never meant to discover. The call had come from Assistant Director Walter Brown, a man Johnson respected for his steady leadership and political acumen. Brown had overseen major investigations throughout his 30-year career and understood the delicate balance between pursuing justice and protecting institutional stability that was crucial for senior FBI management. Agent Johnson, we have a situation at Bravo 12 that requires immediate attention and absolute discretion, Brown had said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent decades managing crises that could never become public knowledge. Evidence custodian Robert Miller was found dead in the facility this morning. Initial assessment suggests suspicious circumstances, but this investigation must be handled with extraordinary care given the sensitive nature of materials housed there. Johnson understood the implications immediately. Evidence custodians at facilities like Bravo 12 had access to information that could destroy political careers, expose criminal conspiracies spanning decades, and reveal connections between federal law enforcement and activities that would scandalize the American public if they ever became known. Miller's death could be connected to any number of classified investigations, or it could represent something far more dangerous: an attempt to compromise the integrity of federal evidence storage itself. The drive to Bravo 12 took Johnson through increasingly rural terrain that seemed designed to discourage casual visitors and maintain the facility's anonymity. Located on a former military installation that had been decommissioned in the 1990s, the facility was surrounded by farmland and forests that provided natural camouflage and isolation from civilian populations. No signs marked the access roads, and the facility itself was designed to appear like a conventional government office building rather than one of the most secure evidence storage locations in the federal system. Security at Bravo 12 operated under protocols that Johnson had rarely encountered in his federal career. Multiple layers of authentication were required for entry, including biometric identification, encrypted access codes that changed daily, and background verification through real-time database checks. The guards were federal agents rather than contracted security personnel, chosen specifically for their ability to maintain absolute confidentiality about facility operations and the nature of materials stored there. Agent Johnson, "Director Kenneth Anderson is waiting for you in the administrative section," said the senior security officer. A woman in her early 50s with the controlled demeanor of someone who'd spent years protecting secrets that could reshape American politics if they ever became public. "The crime scene has been secured, but we haven't begun detailed analysis pending your arrival." Director Anderson represented the type of federal administrator that Johnson had worked with throughout his career. Competent professionals who understood that their primary responsibility was protecting institutional interests while ensuring that justice was served within acceptable parameters. At 55, Anderson had overseen evidence storage operations for 8 years, managing a facility that contained materials so sensitive that their very existence was known to fewer than 100 people within the entire federal government. Agent Johnson, Robert Miller was discovered at approximately 0430 hours by the night shift supervisor during routine security rounds, Anderson explained, as they walked through corridors lined with vault doors that concealed evidence from investigations spanning decades. Miller was found in Storage Section 7, which contains materials from major organized crime investigations dating back to the 1990s. Preliminary examination suggests he died from blunt force trauma, but we need a thorough investigation to determine what happened and whether any classified materials were compromised. The crime scene in Storage Section 7 was unlike anything Johnson had encountered in his federal career. Robert Miller's body was found lying between two massive filing systems that contained original documents, recorded conversations, and physical evidence from investigations that had dismantled major criminal organizations and exposed corruption reaching into federal agencies themselves. The setting suggested that Miller's death was connected to the specific materials housed in this section, rather than being a random criminal act. Miller had been the facility's senior evidence custodian for 12 years, with access to materials that could expose criminal conspiracies, political corruption, and institutional failures that the federal government had worked decades to keep secret. His position required the highest security clearances and psychological evaluations designed to ensure that individuals with such access could be trusted with information that could destabilize American institutions if it ever became public. "Miller was one of our most trusted employees," Anderson continued, his voice reflecting genuine concern about both the personal loss and the institutional implications of the death. He had access to virtually everything stored in this facility, including materials from investigations that remain active and others that have been sealed for national security reasons. We need to determine whether his death was connected to his work here and whether any sensitive materials were accessed or compromised. Johnson's initial examination of the crime scene revealed evidence suggesting that Miller's death had not been the result of a random break-in or routine criminal activity. The facility's security system showed no evidence of unauthorized entry, and Miller's access credentials indicated he had entered the facility during his normal shift on the evening of March 14th. The circumstances suggested that Miller had been killed by someone with legitimate access to the facility, someone who understood its security procedures and had reason to be there without arousing suspicion. Johnson's investigation began with a comprehensive review of the facility's security systems and access logs, hoping to identify who had been present in the facility during the time frame when Miller's death had occurred. The evidence storage facility maintained sophisticated surveillance and tracking systems designed to monitor every aspect of operations and ensure that no classified materials could be accessed or removed without creating detailed records. Chief Security Officer Thomas Wilson was a former FBI technical specialist whose expertise in surveillance systems and evidence management had made him one of the most trusted professionals in federal evidence storage operations. Wilson had been at Bravo 12 for 6 years, overseeing security systems that protected materials whose compromise could threaten national security, and expose criminal activities involving some of the most powerful individuals in American society. Agent Johnson, our security systems are designed to track every person who enters this facility and monitor their activities while they're here, Wilson explained as he pulled up computerized logs that documented facility access over the past week. Every door opening, every file access, every movement through the facility is recorded and backed up on secure servers. If someone killed Miller, our systems should have captured evidence of their presence and activities. The security logs revealed a troubling pattern that immediately complicated Johnson's investigation. On the evening of March 14th, several individuals had been present in the facility during time periods that overlapped with when Miller's death had occurred. In addition to Miller himself, the log showed facility access by Director Anderson, Chief Wilson, Administrative Specialist Sarah Collins, and Dr. Harold Baker, a federal psychologist who conducted periodic security evaluations of facility personnel. "This is unusual," Wilson admitted as they reviewed the access patterns. "Normally, only 1 or 2 people are in the facility during evening hours, and they follow predetermined schedules that minimize the chances of personnel being in the same section simultaneously. Having 5 people here during the same evening shift is outside normal operational parameters." Johnson recognized that the presence of multiple potential suspects within the facility during the relevant time frame would significantly complicate his investigation. Each individual had legitimate reasons to be at Bravo 12 and possessed the security clearances necessary to access the areas where Miller's body had been found. Determining which, if any, of them had been involved in Miller's death would require careful analysis of their movements, motivations, and access to the specific evidence storage areas. The computerized access logs revealed additional information that raised Johnson's suspicions about the circumstances surrounding Miller's death. The logs showed that someone had accessed Storage Section 7, where Miller's body was found, at 22:47 hours on March 14th. But the identity code associated with that access had been corrupted in the computer system, making it impossible to determine which authorized individual had entered that section. "That shouldn't be possible," Wilson said, his professional confidence clearly shaken by the discovery of the corrupted access record. "Our system includes multiple redundancy checks specifically to prevent unauthorized access or identification failures. If someone's identity code was corrupted, it suggests either sophisticated technical manipulation or administrative override by someone with the highest level of system access." Johnson understood that the corrupted access record represented either significant technical malfunction or evidence that someone with administrative privileges had deliberately manipulated the security system to conceal their presence in Storage Section 7. Such manipulation would require intimate knowledge of the facility's security protocols and access to override codes that were restricted to the facility's most senior personnel. Further analysis of the security logs revealed another anomaly that deepened Johnson's concerns about potential institutional involvement in Miller's death. The facility's surveillance cameras had experienced a routine maintenance shutdown in Storage Section 7 from 22:30 to 23:15 hours on March 14th, a time frame that encompassed both the corrupted access record and the estimated time of Miller's death. The maintenance shutdown was scheduled by someone with administrative authority, Wilson explained, though his voice reflected growing unease about the coincidences surrounding Miller's death. "According to our records, the shutdown was authorized by Director Anderson to allow for routine camera calibration and system updates, but I don't recall being notified of any planned maintenance for that evening." Johnson recognized that the camera shutdown, combined with the corrupted access record, suggested a level of premeditation and institutional knowledge that pointed toward involvement by senior facility personnel rather than external criminal activity. Someone with detailed understanding of the facility's security systems had created a window of opportunity for Miller's murder, while ensuring that their identity and activities wouldn't be captured by normal surveillance procedures. The investigation took on additional complexity when Johnson discovered that Storage Section 7 contained evidence from one of the most sensitive and politically explosive investigations in recent FBI history, Operation Clean Sweep, a multi-year investigation into political corruption that had been abruptly terminated in 2019, despite evidence suggesting criminal activity involving multiple federal officials and elected representatives. Operation Clean Sweep had investigated allegations of a systematic bribery and influence peddling network that involved defense contractors, congressional staff members, and senior federal officials in multiple agencies. The investigation had uncovered evidence of criminal conspiracies that reached into the highest levels of the federal government, but had been terminated following pressure from congressional oversight committees and senior Justice Department officials who argued that continuing the investigation could damage national security and institutional stability. Miller was one of the few people with access to the complete Clean Sweep files, Anderson explained when Johnson questioned him about the materials stored in Section 7. The investigation generated thousands of documents, recorded conversations, and physical evidence that documented criminal activities involving very powerful people. The decision was made to seal those materials, indefinitely to protect ongoing national security operations and prevent damage to institutional relationships. Johnson understood that Miller's access to the Clean Sweep materials provided a potential motive for his murder that extended far beyond the facility itself. If Miller had discovered additional evidence of criminal activity or had threatened to expose information that powerful individuals wanted to keep secret, his death could be connected to efforts to protect high-level political and institutional interests rather than simple criminal activity. The realization that Miller's murder might be connected to some of the most politically sensitive evidence in federal custody added a new dimension to Johnson's investigation. He was no longer simply investigating a murder within a federal facility. He was potentially investigating a killing designed to protect powerful individuals whose criminal activities were documented in materials that could never become public without causing massive political and institutional upheaval. Johnson's investigation deepened when he began interviewing the facility personnel who had been present on the evening of Miller's death. Each individual possessed both the access and opportunity to have killed Miller, but determining their motivations and potential connections to the sensitive materials stored in Section 7 would require careful analysis of their backgrounds, financial situations, and relationships with external parties who might benefit from Miller's death. His first interview was with Administrative Specialist Sarah Collins, a woman in her late 30s who had worked at Bravo 12 for 5 years, managing personnel records and coordinating administrative functions for the facility. Collins had access to detailed information about facility operations, staff schedules, and the general nature of materials stored in different sections, though her security clearance didn't permit her to examine the actual evidence files. I was working late on March 14th to complete quarterly personnel reports that were due to FBI headquarters, Collins explained during their meeting in her office, which was located in the facility's administrative section away from the evidence storage areas. I usually work standard business hours, but I'd fallen behind on my reports due to some personal issues and needed to finish them before the deadline. Johnson noted that Collins appeared nervous during the interview, frequently checking her watch and avoiding direct eye contact. Her explanation for working late was plausible, but her demeanor suggested she might be concealing information about her activities or knowledge of events surrounding Miller's death. Johnson's review of Collins's personnel file revealed information that raised questions about her financial situation and potential vulnerabilities to external pressure. Despite her government salary, Collins had recently purchased an expensive new car and had been making large payments on credit card debt that seemed inconsistent with her income level. Such financial pressure could make federal employees vulnerable to recruitment by hostile parties interested in accessing classified materials. His next interview was with Dr. Harold Baker, the federal psychologist who conducted security evaluations of facility personnel. Dr. Baker was in his early 50s with extensive experience in federal law enforcement psychology and had been responsible for conducting the psychological assessments that determined which employees could be trusted with access to the facility's most sensitive materials. I was at the facility on March 14th to conduct follow-up evaluations with several staff members as part of their annual security reviews, Dr. Baker explained during their meeting in a conference room designed for confidential discussions. These evaluations are required for all personnel with access to classified materials, and I typically conduct them during evening hours to minimize disruption to normal facility operations. Dr. Baker's presence at the facility provided him with both opportunity and cover for potential involvement in Miller's death. As the psychologist responsible for staff evaluations, he had legitimate reasons to be in different areas of the facility and to interact with various personnel without arousing suspicion. His professional knowledge of psychological manipulation and criminal behavior could also have enabled him to plan and execute Miller's murder in ways that would minimize evidence and suspicion. "Did your evaluation schedule bring you into contact with Robert Miller that evening?" Johnson asked. "Miller wasn't scheduled for evaluation until next month," Dr. Baker replied. "But I did encounter him briefly around 10 p.m. when I was moving between evaluation rooms. He appeared to be carrying some files and seemed focused on whatever task he was completing. We didn't have any substantial conversation." Johnson found Dr. Baker's account interesting because it suggested Miller had been actively working with files from Storage Section 7 around the time of his death. If Miller had discovered something significant in those files, perhaps evidence that someone wanted to keep secret, it could provide a direct motive for his murder. The investigation took a more troubling turn when Johnson interviewed Chief Security Officer Thomas Wilson about his activities on the evening of March 14th. Wilson's position gave him comprehensive access to all facility security systems and the ability to manipulate surveillance equipment and access logs in ways that could facilitate criminal activity while concealing evidence. "I was conducting routine security inspections that evening as part of my monthly facility review," Wilson explained, though Johnson detected a slight nervousness in his voice that seemed inconsistent with someone simply describing routine duties. "These inspections involve checking physical security measures, reviewing system logs, and ensuring that all storage areas are properly secured." Johnson recognized that Wilson's security responsibilities provided perfect cover for potential criminal activity. As the person responsible for maintaining facility security, Wilson could access any area, manipulate surveillance systems, and alter access logs without arousing suspicion from other staff members. His technical expertise would also enable him to create the kind of sophisticated cover-up that appeared to have occurred in connection with Miller's death. "Chief Wilson, can you explain the camera maintenance shutdown in Storage Section 7 that occurred during your inspection period?" Johnson asked directly. Wilson's response revealed a troubling gap in his knowledge of facility operations that seemed inconsistent with his security responsibilities. "I wasn't aware of any scheduled maintenance for that evening," Wilson admitted. "According to our standard procedures, all maintenance shutdowns should be coordinated through my office, but I don't have any record of authorizing camera work in Section 7. The revelation that Wilson, as Chief Security Officer, had no knowledge of the camera shutdown that had occurred during the time frame of Miller's death suggested either a serious breach of security protocols or deliberate deception by someone with the authority to override normal procedures. Johnson understood that identifying who had authorized the maintenance shutdown could lead directly to Miller's killer. His final interview of the day was with Director Kenneth Anderson, whose administrative authority over facility operations made him both a crucial witness and a potential suspect in Miller's death. Anderson's position gave him access to override codes, authority to schedule maintenance shutdowns, and detailed knowledge of the most sensitive materials stored in the facility. Agent Johnson, I want to emphasize that Robert Miller was one of our most trusted and competent employees, Anderson said during their meeting in his office, which overlooked the facility's main storage areas. His death represents not only a personal tragedy, but also a potential security breach that could have far-reaching consequences for federal law enforcement operations. Johnson noted that Anderson's response seemed carefully prepared and focused more on institutional concerns than on personal grief or shock about Miller's death. Such a response might be appropriate for a senior administrator responsible for protecting classified materials, but it could also indicate prior knowledge of threats to Miller, or involvement in activities that led to his death. Director Anderson, our investigation has revealed that you were present in the facility during the evening when Miller was killed. Can you provide details about your activities that night? Anderson's explanation revealed information that significantly complicated Johnson's investigation. I received a call around 9 p.m. from someone claiming to be from FBI headquarters, requesting immediate verification of certain materials stored in Section 7. The caller provided appropriate authentication codes and claimed to be conducting an urgent review related to ongoing national security operations. Johnson recognized that if Anderson's account was accurate, it suggested that Miller's death might be connected to external parties with access to classified federal communication protocols and detailed knowledge of materials stored at Bravo 12. The sophistication required for such an operation pointed toward involvement by intelligence agencies, organized crime groups with sophisticated capabilities, or individuals within the federal government who had turned against their institutional responsibilities. Johnson's investigation reached a critical turning point when he discovered that the phone call Director Anderson had received on the evening of Miller's death had not originated from FBI headquarters, but from an external number that could not be traced through normal telecommunications records. The sophisticated nature of the call, including the use of apparently authentic authentication codes, suggested a level of planning and institutional knowledge that pointed toward involvement by individuals with access to classified federal communication protocols. Technical analysis of the facility's communication systems revealed that the call to Anderson had been routed through multiple encrypted servers designed to obscure its origin, indicating the use of professional-grade technology typically available only to intelligence agencies or sophisticated criminal organizations. The caller's knowledge of appropriate authentication codes suggested either a security breach within FBI headquarters or involvement by someone with legitimate access to classified communication procedures. Agent Johnson, this type of call routing and authentication code manipulation requires resources and expertise that are beyond the capabilities of ordinary criminals, explained Special Agent Margaret Hayes, a federal communications specialist who had been brought in to assist with the technical aspects of the investigation. We're looking at either foreign intelligence involvement or participation by individuals within the federal law enforcement community who have access to our most sensitive communication systems. The discovery that Miller's death might be connected to an organized effort involving external parties with sophisticated intelligence capabilities fundamentally changed the nature of Johnson's investigation. He was no longer simply investigating a murder within a federal facility. He was potentially uncovering an espionage operation or criminal conspiracy that had succeeded in penetrating the highest levels of federal evidence storage and security operations. Johnson's review of Miller's recent activities revealed additional evidence suggesting that his death had been connected to his discovery of irregularities in the handling of evidence from Operation Clean Sweep. According to facility access logs, Miller had been conducting an unusual pattern of file reviews in Section 7 during the weeks leading up to his death, accessing materials that he would normally have had no reason to examine as part of his routine duties. Miller had requested permission to conduct a comprehensive inventory of materials in Section 7, Anderson explained when Johnson questioned him about the unusual access pattern. He claimed to have noticed some discrepancies in our cataloging system and wanted to ensure that all materials were properly accounted for. I approved his request because maintaining accurate records is crucial for the integrity of our evidence storage operations. Johnson recognized that Miller's inventory work had potentially led him to discover evidence of previous unauthorized access to the clean sweep materials or irregularities in the handling of those files that someone was willing to kill to keep secret. The timing of Miller's death, just as he was completing his inventory work, suggested that his discoveries had posed a direct threat to individuals whose activities were documented in those classified files. Further investigation revealed that Miller had documented his inventory findings in a detailed report that was missing from his office and had not been found among his personal effects. The absence of this report suggested that whoever had killed Miller had also taken steps to prevent his discoveries from becoming known to other facility personnel or FBI oversight officials. Johnson's attempts to locate Miller's missing report led him to examine the facility's computer systems for any electronic copies or backup files that might contain information about the discrepancies Miller had discovered. This analysis revealed evidence of sophisticated data manipulation that indicated someone with administrative access to the facility's computer systems had systematically deleted files related to Miller's inventory work. Someone with high-level system access has been removing electronic records related to Miller's Section 7 inventory, reported Special Agent David Clark, a federal computer crimes specialist who had been assigned to assist with the digital aspects of the investigation. The deletion pattern suggests someone who understood our backup procedures and had the authority to access secured servers where sensitive files are stored. The systematic deletion of Miller's work product indicated a level of premeditation and institutional access that strongly suggested involvement by senior facility personnel rather than external criminals. Johnson understood that identifying who had deleted Miller's files could lead directly to his killer, but it would also potentially expose criminal activity involving individuals with the highest levels of federal security clearance and institutional trust. The investigation took on additional urgency when Johnson discovered that several key pieces of evidence from Operation Clean Sweep appeared to be missing from Section 7. Miller's inventory work had apparently identified gaps in the evidence collection that suggested unauthorized removal of materials that could have exposed criminal activity by powerful political figures. According to Miller's preliminary notes, which we recovered from a personal notebook he kept at home, he had identified at least 12 items from the Clean Sweep investigation that were supposed to be in Section 7 but could not be located. Johnson reported to Assistant Director Brown during a secure communication session. These missing items included recorded conversations, financial documents, and physical evidence that had been crucial to the original investigation. The revelation that evidence had been systematically removed from one of the most secure storage facilities in the federal system represented a security breach with potentially catastrophic implications for federal law enforcement operations. If individuals with access to classified evidence could selectively remove materials that incriminated them or their associates, the integrity of the entire federal evidence storage system would be compromised. Johnson's investigation also revealed that the missing evidence from Operation Clean Sweep included materials that could have led to criminal charges against several individuals who had subsequently been appointed to senior positions within the federal government. The strategic removal of these specific items suggested a coordinated effort to protect individuals whose careers and freedom depended on keeping certain criminal activities from becoming public knowledge. Johnson's investigation reached its most dangerous phase when he discovered that the criminal conspiracy involving evidence tampering at Bravo 12 extended beyond the facility itself to include coordination with external parties who had significant financial and political interests in keeping Operation Clean Sweep materials from ever becoming public. The scope of the conspiracy suggested that Miller's death was part of a broader criminal enterprise involving some of the most powerful individuals in American politics and business. Analysis of financial records for facility personnel revealed a pattern of suspicious transactions that indicated several staff members had been receiving substantial payments from sources that could not be identified through normal banking channels. The payments had been made through offshore accounts and shell companies designed to obscure their ultimate origin, suggesting funding by individuals or organizations with sophisticated money laundering capabilities. Agent Johnson, we've identified approximately $2.3 million in suspicious payments made to facility personnel over the past 3 years, reported Special Agent Patricia Martinez, a federal financial crimes specialist who had been assigned to trace the money trail connected to the evidence tampering conspiracy. The payments were made to Director Anderson, Chief Wilson, Administrative Specialist Collins, and Dr. Baker through a complex network of offshore accounts that would require substantial resources and expertise to establish and maintain. The discovery that multiple facility personnel had been receiving coordinated payments from external sources confirmed Johnson's assessment that Miller's death was connected to an organized criminal conspiracy rather than individual criminal activity. The level of coordination and funding required for such an operation suggested involvement by individuals with access to substantial financial resources and sophisticated criminal organization capabilities. Johnson's analysis of the payment patterns revealed that the amounts and timing of payments to facility personnel had been directly correlated with their access to specific types of evidence and their ability to manipulate facility security and record-keeping systems. Director Anderson had received the largest payments, reflecting his authority to override security protocols and authorize access to the most sensitive materials, while other personnel had been compensated based on their specific roles in facilitating unauthorized evidence access and manipulation. The investigation also revealed that the criminal conspiracy had been operating for at least 3 years, suggesting that the systematic removal of evidence from Operation Clean Sweep had been a long-term operation rather than a response to immediate threats. The extended timeline indicated that the conspirators had been working methodically to identify and remove any evidence that could expose their criminal activities or those of their associates. The evidence suggests that this conspiracy was initiated shortly after Operation Clean Sweep was officially terminated in 2019, Johnson reported to Assistant Director Brown. The timing suggests that powerful individuals who had been investigated during Clean Sweep recognized that the evidence stored at Bravo 12 represented a continuing threat to their freedom and political careers, and they organized a systematic effort to compromise the facility and remove incriminating materials. Johnson's investigation of the external parties funding the conspiracy led him to identify connections to several defense contractors and lobbying organizations that had been subjects of the original Operation Clean Sweep investigation. These organizations had substantial financial interests in ensuring that evidence of their criminal activities remained sealed, and they possessed the resources necessary to organize and fund a sophisticated evidence tampering operation. The most troubling discovery in Johnson's investigation was evidence that the conspiracy had succeeded in removing or destroying materials that could have led to criminal charges against a sitting U.S. Senator, 2 federal judges, and several senior officials within the Department of Defense. The systematic protection of these individuals suggested that the evidence tampering operation was designed to preserve a network of political and institutional corruption that extended far beyond the original scope of Operation Clean Sweep. "We're not just looking at evidence tampering," Johnson concluded in his preliminary report. "We're looking at a criminal conspiracy designed to protect a network of political corruption that reaches into the highest levels of American government." Miller's death was necessary to prevent him from exposing this conspiracy and the systematic compromise of federal evidence storage operations. The investigation revealed that Miller had not only discovered evidence of unauthorized material removal, but had also identified the specific individuals who had been protected by the evidence tampering. His inventory work had led him to cross-reference missing evidence with the original Clean Sweep investigation files, allowing him to determine which criminal activities were being concealed and which individuals were being protected. Johnson's review of Miller's personal notes, recovered from his home computer, revealed that he had been preparing to report his discoveries to FBI headquarters and had been gathering additional evidence to support his allegations of systematic evidence tampering. The timing of his death, just days before he was scheduled to meet with internal affairs investigators, confirmed that his murder had been designed to prevent exposure of the criminal conspiracy. The scope and sophistication of the criminal conspiracy Johnson had uncovered represented a direct threat to the foundations of American democracy and the rule of law. The systematic corruption of federal evidence storage, combined with the willingness to commit murder to protect criminal activities, indicated that the United States was facing an internal threat comparable to foreign espionage or domestic terrorism. Johnson's investigation had also revealed that the conspiracy included contingency plans for eliminating other potential witnesses and destroying additional evidence if their activities were discovered, and prosecution appeared imminent. Communications intercepts indicated that plans had been developed to target other facility personnel who might have knowledge of the evidence tampering, demonstrating the conspirators' willingness to escalate their criminal activities to protect their interests. The arrests began at dawn on September 23, 2024, with coordinated operations designed to prevent the destruction of evidence and eliminate any possibility of flight by the conspirators. Director Kenneth Anderson was arrested at his home in Arlington, Virginia, while Chief Security Officer Thomas Wilson was taken into custody at the Bravo 12 facility as he attempted to access computer systems that contained evidence of the conspiracy. Administrative Specialist Sarah Collins and Dr. Harold Baker were arrested simultaneously at their respective residences, while federal agents executed search warrants at multiple locations associated with the external parties who had funded the evidence tampering operation. The coordinated nature of the arrests reflected the scope of the conspiracy and the need to prevent any coordination among the conspirators that could compromise the ongoing investigation. This case represents one of the most serious breaches of federal law enforcement integrity in our nation's history, announced Attorney General Patricia Hayes during a press conference about the arrests. The systematic corruption of federal evidence storage operations threatened the foundation of our justice system and represented a direct attack on the rule of law itself. The prosecutions that followed established important. Director Anderson received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison after being convicted on charges including conspiracy, murder, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal civil rights statutes. The court found that Anderson had been the operational leader of the evidence tampering conspiracy and had directly participated in planning Miller's murder to prevent exposure of their criminal activities. Chief Wilson was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, reflecting his role in manipulating facility security systems and providing technical expertise that enabled the systematic removal of evidence. Administrative Specialist Collins received 15 years, while Dr. Baker was sentenced to 12 years for his participation in the conspiracy and his role in providing psychological expertise that facilitated the manipulation of facility personnel. The external parties who had funded the evidence tampering operation faced charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to federal RICO violations for their participation in what prosecutors characterized as a systematic effort to subvert federal law enforcement operations. Several prominent defense contractors and political figures were convicted and received sentences that reflected the scope of their criminal activities and their threat to democratic institutions. Agent Frank Johnson's investigation not only solved Miller's murder, but also exposed a criminal conspiracy that had compromised federal law enforcement operations for years and threatened the integrity of the American justice system. His work resulted in comprehensive reforms to federal evidence storage procedures and established new protocols designed to prevent similar corruption in the future. Johnson's investigation prevented what could have been the complete collapse of public confidence in federal law enforcement, praised FBI Director Christopher Wray during a ceremony recognizing Johnson's exceptional service. His courage in pursuing this investigation, despite significant personal risk and institutional pressure, exemplifies the highest standards of federal law enforcement. The reforms implemented in response to Johnson's investigation included establishment of an independent oversight board with authority to monitor federal evidence storage operations, mandatory rotation of personnel with access to sensitive materials, and enhanced security procedures designed to prevent unauthorized access to classified evidence. The reforms also included new whistleblower protections for federal employees who report evidence of corruption or misconduct within law enforcement agencies. Congressional oversight committees conducted extensive hearings about the Bravo 12 conspiracy, focusing on how such systematic corruption had been able to continue for years without detection and what changes were necessary to prevent similar failures in the future. The hearings revealed broader problems with federal oversight procedures and led to legislation strengthening accountability measures for classified operations. For Johnson personally, the investigation represented both the pinnacle of his federal career and a sobering education in the realities of institutional corruption and political power. At 48, with his pension security assured through his promotion to senior supervisory agent, he understood that his willingness to pursue the investigation despite significant risks had defined not only this case but his legacy within federal law enforcement. The Bravo 12 investigation also prompted reviews of other federal evidence storage facilities to identify whether similar corruption existed elsewhere in the system. These reviews led to additional arrests and reforms that strengthened the integrity of federal evidence storage operations nationwide. Robert Miller's murder had initially appeared to be an isolated criminal incident within a federal facility, but Johnson's investigation revealed it to be part of a systematic effort to subvert American justice that reached into the highest levels of government and threatened the foundation of democratic institutions. The case served as a reminder that protecting democracy requires constant vigilance against corruption, even when that corruption involves individuals entrusted with the highest levels of responsibility for protecting public interests. The case concluded with the understanding that protecting democratic institutions requires more than laws and procedures. It requires individuals willing to risk their careers and personal safety to ensure that justice prevails over corruption, regardless of how powerful or well-connected the criminals might be. Johnson's investigation proved that such individuals still existed within federal law enforcement and that they remained committed to serving the American people rather than protecting criminal conspiracies that threatened the nation's democratic foundations.